No, Anderson.
Oh, that's definitely.
Yeah. I had to laugh. I had maybe a soft opening or something in the
of it.
distillery the other
How
night.
was it?
And cars were driving out of there. Yeah, traffic going up railroads, honking at these guys who were like going. I'm thinking to myself, oh, here it comes.
Well, they said it was just gonna be regular lemonade too for the
Of course.
designated driver.
Yeah, right. Of course. But yeah, here it goes.
It's like leaving the parking lot after a Raiders game. There's people drink all day.
That's my obligation. But I will. That's professional over there. I think that the term is distilled spirit. And you can, once you get alcohol, you can turn it into a number of different subcategories. That's how I understand it. So, do you live on Railroad?
No, we live on Neiman.
Oh,
We
okay.
live right across from the, that's why last time I was here. Okay, it's heavy truck, there's a lot of traffic. I go, they do put another electric sign, so we've seen a lot of traffic.
So you're the development at the other end of the street.
That's right.
Yeah, that and if people just don't pay attention to 25 miles an hour for school zones.
Right. Well, they punched Anderson through as well.
Yes, they did.
And so we've always been influenced by, when school gets in, school gets out.
Now you have a bus service.
Up by Hemingway
Yes.
and closer to the middle school.
Yes.
But the last 2 blocks of Anderson before it hits Railroad, they get up some pretty good traffic there. There used to be a highway patrolman lived next door to us, and he would get so frustrated, he'd throw prunings out into the street. Just to make them pause.
The guy was telling me one time that in his neighborhood, a lady stands out with a hairdryer. They think it's a
That's good. Maybe because I was a private guy and they only.
Yes, Councilmember Anderson,
Public things.
Councilmember Lauren, Councilmember New,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Cowan,
Here.
Mayor Bianchi.
Thank you. Gail Wingard, would you please lead us in the pledge of allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to approval of the agenda.
Mayor and Council, there are no changes to the agenda.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? None. Passes unanimous. We did hold a closed session prior to this meeting, and we have no reportable action out of the closed session. Okay. We're going to move on to the council and staff comments. Councilmember Anderson.
Thank you, Mayor. Got going on in my machine on Monday the 12th. I attended the Yellow County Transportation District Board meeting. That meeting held with the offices. And may have noticed that there was a fire at the charging compressor for the filling station.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember New.
On August 14th, I attended the Yolo County Housing meeting, and nothing to report out from that, although we did do a lot, but I don't think anything we need to report this time. SACOG meeting was on the 15th, Thursday, and I will report that we did receive a grant for $250,000 for a study of the Grant Avenue 128 Russell Boulevard crossing in that area. So we have that study to look forward to. And the good thing about that, and the hope that goes with that, is that oftentimes, or many times, once the study is completed and the state has put out that kind of money for the study, they will fund the project, and that's what we're hoping for. Also, I have another thing. Okay, micro transit. The SACOG CEO stopped me after the meeting and said that he would be interested, if we are interested, in doing a possible micro transit test in town. And I said, I think we're interested, but we need to write something up, what we would like to do. And there is a test now going on in Knights Landing, and I have told the city manager that I will check with the person in charge of that and check with SACOG and see what they are doing, and bring that back to the board and the city manager.
Could you explain to everybody what microtransit is?
Microtransit is small, could be something as small as as a sedan or a van. It might be a 6-passenger van, but it's not a big bus. It's something small. Right now, there is also a study in microtransit being done at Sacramento State, and it's autonomous. And I don't think that we can test that because they can't go on public streets, but for some reason the Sac State isn't public. I don't know, it doesn't sound right to me. So I would like to see that come too, just for the fun of it. But that's what microtransit is, smaller than a big 40-passenger bus or whatever.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And then finally, I met with the city manager this morning, and we talked about
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Callen.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. On the 7th, I attended the fire promotion ceremony, and on the 12th, the chamber mixer, and the 13th, the car show, and yesterday I met with the city manager to review the agenda.
Thank you. So for me, on August 7th, I also attended the fire captain promotions. On the 8th, I attended the chamber board meeting. And on the 12th, I attended the chamber mixer at Berryessa Gap Winery, and they had a lot of the local tradespeople there advertising what they do. I thought it turned out very well. On the 16th, I had a phone call with Benny Dibble about the short-term rentals, the ordinance that we'll be speaking about later tonight. On the 19th, I met with Woody and Rebecca Friday, talking about North Area planning and growth in our city. Also met with the city manager that same day, where we went over the agenda review. I also, after that, I met with Al Vallecillo and Denise Cottrell to also talk about the growth and the planning process for the city. So, thank you everyone for all your time and your hard work put in for this. We appreciate it. I'm going to move on now to public comments for anything that is not on tonight's agenda. We have these sheets at the back of the room if anybody hasn't filled one out. I have several here that were turned in. So the first one I have is from Tina and Jerry Loudon.
That's us. He's shy. I am not. Thank you, Mayor and City Council people. My husband, Tina Loudon and Jerry Loudon, 320 Neiman Street, Lucas, California. So my husband and I are lap swimmers. And we would like to see lap swimming to extend daily from 6 in the morning to 9 in the morning. You're not gonna catch me at 6 in the morning, and maybe perhaps a senior water aerobics could be added. Just to let you know that the 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. slot is not the most convenient time for adults. We've enjoyed the evening swim, but it has been difficult with swim lessons during the summer. Several times our lanes were reduced from 5 instead of 8, and there has been several accidents from the kids, resulting in the pool being shut down. Now, don't get us wrong, we are strong advocates of everyone learning to swim, but I would like to put on record that we'd love to have the lap swimming for adults from 6 to 9 in the morning, and then add a senior water aerobics. Thank you.
Thank you. I have one also on lap swimming. It's Sally Brown. Would you care to come forward, please?
And Kathleen Howson. Hello. Kathleen and I are also lap swimmers. I've been using the pool since I moved here in 1996. And I want to first start by just thanking Tracy Jensen for her wonderful support of the swim program this year. This year has been remarkable with Tammy Jo as the coordinator and Coach Aaron on deck. It has been the most professionally run pool that I've seen since 1996. The lifeguards are on deck, they're watching, they're prepared. It truly is, it's just been a remarkable swim season. We've had a few little hiccups, but we always do, and it's been handled, as I said, really well by City Hall, so I want to thank everybody. We're here today because we are asking to see if there's a way to continue the swim season beyond the regular swim season, and not just for the lap swimmers, but also for the rec swimmers, the young youth too. The youth swim season is already over because they're back in school, but it's going to be in the triple digits all next week. So it's crazy that we have the pool closed even though the kids are back in school. Tammy Jo did have a petition signed, and I'm going to give this to Tracy. There's, I don't know, I don't count how many.
And that was only in a couple of days.
Yeah, of people who are interested in thinking about how to keep the pool open. I'd also like to encourage you, back years ago when we were building the brand new swimming pool, City Council had appointed me and several other people to a swim committee that had existed but hasn't met for many, many years. And I would suggest that you folks consider having at least an ad hoc swim committee for maybe a year to think about how you can expand the use of the pool. I know the pool's expensive, but we're underutilizing it. I think that there could be water aerobics. I just think that it could be used a lot more and have a lot more paying customers. I know there was a study that was done a few years ago, and that I think the end result was that they were feeling like maybe lap swimmers weren't paying enough money, or maybe the swim team wasn't paying enough money. But I think if you think about that a little differently, as are we using it enough, and are there more potential swimmers that could be spreading the cost? So anyways, thank you for listening to me. And Kathleen wants to speak at the same time.
Microphone. Hi. Excuse me for being somewhat late and wet. I had to swim. So, okay, I've been swimming in winter since approximately 1985. I came to town a little bit late in 82, so I would have come earlier if I'd been here. But John Wallace and Bob Harris, who was Bobby Brennan's son-in-law at the time, would open the pool a few nights a week, and we got to swim because he was Red Cross certified. So we've gone, and yeah, it was only on the nights that he was there that we could swim. Couldn't. So over the years, more and more people have been taking advantage of the City of Winter swimming pool, and people are become more cognizant of the health benefits of swimming. When I first moved here, you didn't see people jogging, and now it's like really common. So a lot more people are swimming, and many people now not only use the lap pool, but they also use the shallow part of the pool for water therapy. For the past few weeks, I'm not used to microphones and groups. For the past few years, September has been announced as the end of swim season, and we're told that that date may be extended to October if we get enough swimmers, and we always do get enough swimmers. From November through March, those of us who swim year-round need to go out of town to Vacaville, Davis, or Woodland, Dixon, and Fairfield too. These are the cities that benefit from our dollars being spent not only at the pools, but in their town as well, and we're out there. If our pool were open all year, I believe not only current Winters residents, but new Winters residents, people from outlying areas and other cities would take advantage of using our pool. The city of Winters would benefit from Winters residents staying in town and others coming to swim here. And a final note. In addition to the health benefits our residents receive from coming to Bobby Greenwood Swimming Pool, it's a social interaction that takes place in the sense of community that this promotes. The swimming pool in Winters for me and for many others is a place to see people we know and see others that we get to meet. I hope the city of Winters will consider keeping our pool open for all who would want to be here to swim and share in our community. I know many would appreciate the opportunity. Go Winters.
Thank you. I have another one that was turned in on the same subject from Lisa Hurst. Theme going here.
I just go brief. I'll go brief. Hello, everybody. I'll just go brief about pretty much ditto to everything that she said. And I just want, I'm newly retired this year, so me and my grandson is like special needs. We've been swimming every day. And since I've been swimming, I have a before and after picture. I've lost about 30 pounds just from the swimming. So just all the benefits is what she was talking about before me. Was grateful enough to have them this year, and I'd like to see the full extent of it. Thank you.
Thank you. And I will note that we also had an email that was sent, I believe, to all the council members from Donna Hirschfield, and regarding the same subject as last meeting, and saying how good it's been managed this summer, and encouraging us to look into how we can extend that season out more. It sounds like we have a lot of support for that. Thank you. Let's see, the next one I have here is from Brandon McCapes.
Hi, Brandon McCapes, Express. I'm sorry?
Lap swimming?
No. I just went into the office and I saw that last week a very old article was published with my name on it. Not really sure how that happened. So I'll be doing something to take care of that online tonight.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see, I think the rest of these are on agenda items. The one, Gail Wingard, do you have one that's a general plan procedures and annexation? You want to talk about that comment now or wait until we have, it's not really an agenda item tonight. We have a resolution that we're going to talk about this as far as what comes before the council, that type of thing, but we're not really talking about the general plan procedures and annexation specifically tonight.
I'd like to make it right now if I could.
Okay, yeah.
I know that there's an important meeting going tomorrow night, but I wanted to come in anyway. But my name is Gail Wingard for the public, and I'm a citizen of the community. And my concept of being a city council is to provide services to the existing citizens of the city. And you, the city council, the elected servants of the city, were elected to represent the citizens and community services. Many citizens of the community feel your service is needed. So this is not a negative comment. We really feel that your service is needed. I get quite a few comments from the public, and many citizens of the community feel that your service is needed. The community area I refer to, including not only the citizens of the city of Winters, but the school district, the farm properties surrounding the city. These include the Winters School District, the local farmers located in Yolo and Solano County, the Winters Fire District, the Yolo County and Solano County Ambulance Services, and Winters Cemetery District. And I recommend that the City Council consider
having a meeting to review the strategy of annexation of additional property that influences existing citizens of the area. It is recommended you consider annexations and commercial changes that create tremendous changes be conducted by a special election by the public vote. And I recommend that you discuss this. Because there's a lot of, I don't like the heat of the community of dividing. And I think that election, such as the city of Loomis just had, can be considered. And that's what I wanted to say. And I want to thank you for efforts that you put into everything.
Thank you for coming tonight, and thank you for your service to our city in the past. Yeah, and that just is a reminder to me to let everybody know that we do have a workshop tomorrow. It'll be from 5 to 8:30 at the Public Safety Facility, and we're gonna talk about the whole planning process and how it all works. We're gonna talk about the general plan, where it's at, and we've been working on that. We have several of our people on staff here that have been putting that together, so there'll be a lot of information provided tomorrow on that. We hope you can all join us at that as well. So I believe the rest of them that I have turned in are on agenda items for tonight.
Mine says anything else.
You have something else that's not on the agenda, then come forward, please. Anything else? Okay.
Yeah, so as many of you know, when you drive in on Grant Avenue, out just past the Chevron station, there's a nice sign that says East Main Street. And you know where Railroad Avenue is, and everything east of Main Street, we have Baker, Edwards, Abbey, East Main Street. Then it's Main Street, and then you get to the Catholic Church and you cross and we have the Fire and Police Station. Now, that's still Main Street. So where do the numbers change? 5, 6, or 700 block? I'm never honestly quite sure, and I should know that. So I always kind of have to guess. So I was driving out in the brand new subdivision this summer, and I was rather shocked to see in the roundabout signs that said West Main Street. Have you seen it? And one of them even has a big sign pointing north that says West Main Street. Now, I do deal with people who are directionally challenged all the time, and I would really appreciate it if we could maybe change that and correct it and make anything north, sorry, Jim's gonna change your address, but anything north of Grand Avenue, North Main Street, before you get all those new addresses and that new subdivision being West Main and nobody knows where to find it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. It's been something we can look into. Okay, anything else that's not on tonight's agenda? This one on tonight's agenda? Okay. Great. Thank you, everyone. All right, we will move on to the consent calendar.
All right, council members, I have a couple of items. Item A are the regular meetings from the August 6th city council meeting. Item B is the amplified sound permit for the Winners Healthcare Dinner on the Bridge, which I think is on September 7th. Item C is an agreement with Ludorf and Scalmanini for a wastewater treatment facility. That's for the groundwater monitoring program that we have out there, that's part by the state of California. Item D is a proclamation which is to celebrate the grand opening and the open house for the old food bank facility, which is coming up. Item E is a $1,000 donation from the city to the Salmon Festival coming up in November. And then finally is the amplified and street closure permit for this Friday's Earthquake Festival. And that's the consent calendar.
Do you have any conflicts due to proximity?
Yes, I do have a few here. Item B. Item E. Sound Festival. Item F. Street closure request. Earthquake Festival. And
on the ones on the consent calendar, those are all based on your property being too close to the decision. Okay, I just wanted to note that for the record.
Okay,
Move to approve the consent.
with a motion and a second, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None? Motion passes with the exception of Councilmember Anderson not voting on items B, E, and F due to his proximity. We have no presentations tonight. We'll go on to discussion item number 1, which is continued public hearing. Ordinance 2019-02, which is an ordinance regarding proposed amendments to chapter 17.12, short-term rentals.
Good evening again, Mayor and Council. This item was before you at your last meeting. As you mentioned, it has to do with the regulation of vacation or short-term rentals, as they're sometimes known as. At the last meeting, there was quite a bit of discussion about a number of the regulations that are in the proposed ordinance. The council's focused really primarily on 2 of those issues. One had to do with whether or not an accessory dwelling unit should be prohibited from being used as a vacation or short-term rental. And also, what kind of fee would be charged for a hosted vacation rental. Non-hosted would require conditional use permit, and that fee's been established, but there has been no fee established for hosted vacation rentals. And so after the meeting, I collected some ordinances from various cities, and there's many more I could have collected. But I picked on a few, some of which Abby Vargas had mentioned in an email to me that she had looked into. And in the table that you see in the staff report, it talks about how the various cities sort of treat various aspects of that ordinance. Interestingly, the city of Yountville actually prohibits them altogether, hosted and non-hosted. And we sort of semi-verified that by looking on the Airbnb site and noticing that there were none within the city limits of Yountville at least listed. Some cities prohibit non-hosted, like Nevada City and Grass Valley, where other cities like Napa and our proposed ordinance allow both. 2 cities, Napa and Cloverdale, specifically mention in their ordinance the prohibition of using an ADU as a vacation rental, where other cities, the other 2, Cloverdale and Nevada City, don't make a reference to that, so I presume that to mean they could be used for that purpose. The only one of the cities listed in the table that has a fee currently is Grass Valley for hosted facilities. I also mentioned in the staff report that 2 of the cities simply require registration and paying of your TOT tax for a hosted facility, which was one of the ideas that was discussed at the last meeting, that we wouldn't require a process for a hosted facility. We'd simply make sure that we had a record of their existence and that they paid their TOT tax. I did check with the state of California. There is currently no legislation or in books that prohibits the use of ADUs. There is some discussion about having language that would do that in the future, but it's not the case right now. If that were to happen, obviously we would have to respond to it. Also looked at our most recent, or one of the more recent ADUs that we've permitted on Russell Street, Russell on 3rd. It's a 460 square foot ADU. The fees that they had to pay, the impact fees that they had to pay were $7,581.52. Had it been an equivalent single family home, which obviously 460 is a pretty small home, it would have been $21,000. So in the case of fees, they are reduced considerably. A lot of that dictated by the state of California. The state, when they passed their most recent legislation, further scrutinized the fees that the cities charge for ADUs, and the reason being that if you charge more fees, you're going to have less people that will be interested in doing them, and also your ability to rent them is affected by how much you have to pay to construct the ADU. And so I did mention also that we do list ADUs in our annual housing report. They are not restricted as affordable, but by their nature, they tend to fall into that category because of their limited size. And that's pretty much it. I don't have anything else. If there's questions of what's in the staff report, I'll be happy to try to answer them.
Council have any questions?
Dave, what, do you have any idea of how many granny floods?
I don't know. It's not a thing that I could easily gather in the time frame from the last meeting to this one. We don't really keep them in any sort of database that I could just access. I could probably get a number, but it would take some work to do so. I'd have to start researching some of the annual reports and other ways to try to ascertain where they're located. He is out here. I don't know if he knows, but he might have a better educated guess than I do.
Dan, do you have a guess on how many ADUs there are in town?
Secondary living units, granny flats.
Only only in the context of the annual performance report, and that's typically at most one new ADU unit annually.
But you don't know how many are yet.
How many total there are?
I do not.
Yeah, and would you know how many put covenants on?
So they all have the owner occupancy restriction. We don't actually have anything that's recorded, but it's in the ordinance that the owner has to live in one of the two units. That's the only restriction that's on an ADU. Everything else is allowed. There is nothing in the ADU ordinance that we have now that prohibits them from being used as vacation rentals.
Spend a lot of effort in different neighborhoods, putting covenants on the property so that it can be affordable for up to 50 years.
Yeah, I don't know if the state's even considering anything like that, council member. I couldn't tell you. I do know there's nothing in the current laws that requires that they have any sort of deed restriction as to the affordability.
I don't believe we have covenant on any KDs, at least in the time of this year. It's just, they're considered affordable by design, but there's no restrictions on any that are there.
Can we get a report on how many of those covenants have been put on there?
Sure. We maintain what was referred to as AB 987, and that's a list of all properties in Winters that have an affordability covenant on them. So if you were to look at that report, you'd see the moderates that were part of the Winters Ranch build out. There were 7, and those 7 have been added to that AB 987 list, which is under the housing reports tab. But no, I can't speak to before I was here, and I know some ADUs over in John's neighborhood were built as part of that subdivision. We have been tracking them during this entire housing element because we submitted an annual performance report. But again, from a quantity standpoint, it's not many. I'd say less than a handful. During this housing element period.
2013.
Yeah, 2013 through 2021.
Wondering how we put a vacation rental on a property that's
Well, again, up until this last year, the report for the year 2018, they didn't make any distinction between properties on the APR that had covenants versus the ones that didn't. That was a new element of this most recent year's APR report. So you'd have very low with covenant, then you'd report very low without a covenant. You'd report low with a covenant, low without a covenant, so on. And this was the first year that they started tracking it that way on the report that we submit to the state. I can tell you from a staff perspective, our reporting has been more consistent with what Council Member Anderson referred to, which is we only report if we've only reported if they have an actual affordability covenant on them. So, and I've asked for direction on the non-covenanted one from the HCD, but have gotten no response.
That helps. Yeah, that was one of the questions that came up at our last meeting was, okay, if we allow the ADUs to be used as a short-term rental, can we still take credit for them on our affordable housing count? That's the question.
This staff recommendation would be not. Yeah.
But I don't think we are right now.
No, we're not.
Yeah,
We're
So now either, so it won't make a difference on the count.
It won't make a
It
difference.
won't
because there's
until we get direction from the state on reporting non-covenanted affordable units.
Does that kind of get to your question?
Sorry.
And that's where with the last meeting, I feel that I see no reason why they shouldn't be allowed to be used as Airbnb until the state or somebody says we can't. But then, they should have helped if I may. For Dave here, in the ordinance itself, on 17.54, item number 4, I talked with the city manager about this yesterday. I don't know if he talked to you about it, but I'm concerned about the way that sentence is worded. It says, ensure all designated bedrooms, and, it's about doing the inspections to allow the Airbnbs. And it says, meet current building and fire codes. And I got an issue with that because a lot of these houses are older homes, and the only thing that's going to meet current building and fire codes is something that has been signed off in the last couple of months.
Yeah,
So I think that's, an awful broad brush, and nobody would qualify. So
what
we need to be very
struck the word
specific what's being
current,
inspected.
we struck the word current from that sentence, and because obviously the houses that built at different codes, I know that.
Right.
But what the intent of that is, of course, if you're putting somebody in a part of a house or a structure that was never intended for residential.
Yeah, I got no
occupancy.
problem with checking it
Okay.
for fire and life safety.
Yeah.
It's like you look for smoke detectors, you look for CO2, you look to see that there's a reasonable means of egress. It may not need current egress because it wasn't built correct for current code. But as long as it meets those basic standards, that's what we should be looking for. Because if we're gonna open it up for
No, that's.
2016 code,
Yeah, no.
there's not a house in town that's gonna
Well,
qualify.
like you said, the only ones that are gonna meet it are the ones that are being built. Well, I mean, I get your point, and I could work maybe with the city attorney's office, and we could reword that, so it's clear that it's not intended to take a house built in 1940 and force them to upgrade.
Change every plumbing fixture and left.
All the windows.
All the windows.
Yeah, no.
Basically rebuild the house.
Right, right. And again, I will be honest, that's probably the language that was in the NAPA ordinance that we initially started with.
Once again, we're not there, but.
I understand, but some of this I've recrafted, not all of it.
Yeah. So I just want to see that get made more
Okay.
specific.
So to clarify it, so it's understood that we're not holding you to the 2016 standards.
Dave, we're gonna put in fire life safety codes and specifically fix that.
Okay.
John, would you repeat that?
Yeah, we will specify fire life safety in the inspection. That was the intent. That's what we talked to the planning commission about. We had the building official, fire life safety, smoke detectors, CO2, ingress, egress.
Spell that out in the ordinance.
Yeah, that's an easy fix, and if you were to approve something tonight, when we bring it back for a second reading, you would see that new language added.
Comments, questions?
Yeah, because it's mentioned again in 17.54040, item 1. It says each vacation rental must meet all current building fire codes. So all needs to get out of there. All current.
Right. Yeah, there's a redundant.
So there's a couple places in there.
Yeah,
So,
to make sure we clarify both of them.
thank you.
Okay, with it as amended. All right, and I have no additional comments. Thank you.
Okay.
So at this point, I will open up the public hearing at 7:10.
Just to clarify, we had a public hearing on this already, but we're continuing to take
We'll
public
continue
comment.
the
So, yeah,
public
we
hearing.
closed, we closed the public hearing already, but we'll take public comment on it. Just a little technical.
All right, thank you. So I have several people who turned in sheets on that. The first one I have here on top is Jim Crabtree.
Hello, council. My name is Jim Crabtree, and I live on 727 Main Street. I'm here tonight because I've been following John's newsletter that we get every week about the Airbnbs, and I understand people have concerns about having Airbnbs in their neighborhood and stuff. Last week, I was approached by one of the neighbors that was petitioning, trying to get neighbors to sign a petition against one of the Airbnbs in the neighborhood. So I came here. Penny right over there backs up to me. Our houses back up to each other. And so I'm here kind of as, I think that people should have a right to do what they want with their house within governance, what the city allows, and as long as they're responsible people. I'm just here tonight. I've known Benny since he's pretty much moved in. We met shortly after he moved in. I don't know if I popped my head over his house or he popped his or fence or what have you, but he came over and approached me, knocked on my door. I said, hey, I want to give you my phone number. I'm going to be here a lot. There'll be sometimes I might have people staying there, and I want you to feel free to always give me a call. When we first had it, a couple times we had a little bit of noise disturbances after 10 p.m. Nothing that didn't, hey, can you guys keep it down, that didn't be quiet. I talked to Benny about that. He was very proactive with it. Like I said, I sleep with my windows open. I haven't heard anything in at least a year, maybe longer. I'd have to really think about it. He's been proactive in his listings. He's got signs up there, and it has not been a problem. It seems like the neighbors were or one neighbor may have been trying to recruit other neighbors within the meeting. My house, if anybody's gonna hear, it's gonna be me. So I haven't heard it. So I just came here as, I support Airbnbs, and, I support people that are proactive and responsible owners to be able to use their property in accordance to, governance. So that's why I'm here tonight. If there's any questions, I'm happy to answer. Probably not. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The next one I have is from Betty Dipple.
Hi, Benny Dipple, 726 Blue Pine Way. First off, just want to thank the council for pushing this and listening to more comments, getting more facts on the issue and the vote at hand. I think that one, going off Mayor Biassi's comment at the last meeting around, we hear about communities that get, there's basically whole neighborhoods that just turn into short-term rentals. And it really disrupts and destructs the community that winters have built here. And while I think, just realistically, from an economics perspective, that's not going to happen in winters, I understand the concern. What I'm worried about is that we're not addressing that concern in the ordinance. And I think, not that I'm saying there should be more regulation, I'm just thinking, I just want to make sure that the goals of the council and the potential issues are specifically addressed in the regulation. And it's not just, well, we took some of the neighboring cities and towns and we, put in language and then just struck out things that either people brought up that weren't relevant. But I think, once again, using that as the starting base and not saying what are the problems that we're trying to solve. And secondly, and I think these go together because I think if we specify clearly what regulations are needed and what is needed to have a short-term rental, then there's been a ton of discussion around conceptually, is it okay to have short-term rentals in our community? And this idea that the fee for a non-hosted rental is non-negotiable because it's a conditional use permit, to me, it is a little strange because the fundamental idea that, well, the way that you're using your house requires a conditional use permit, but a hosted rental doesn't need a conditional use permit. I guess maybe I don't understand the definition of a conditional use permit and why it's needed. But I guess if we think about it, if you're running a business, if it's not consistent with the residential zoning, then it seems like if one it needs a conditional use permit, then the other would too. Completely understand that we'll say the risks are higher if the owner is not there all the time. But my concern is, one, from a fee perspective, I think that some of the discussions we've had to cut down the ordinance just requires less effort from the city, which I think makes sense. And I think with that, we should be able to bring the fees down to correspond with the effort. Because I think a lot of the discussion has already happened. It's not, oh, if I want to open a barber shop out of my house, it's, well, what impact does a barber shop have on the people around 726 Lupine, right? I think we've already talked about that. I think any discussion around like a specific house, then I think there's a lot of bias. It should be clearly stated if that person's not going to get a permit, well, what did they not meet, right? It shouldn't be, well, these neighbors don't want it, or these neighbors don't like someone. Because once again, if they meet the criteria, unless they can point out something that's significantly different from that house than another one, then I think it opens it up to a lot of bias. So I think by clearly stating what is required to have a short-term rental, then it removes the need to have a conditional use permit, which removes the need to have individual hearings for each person, and you're able to then lower the fee for non-hosted rentals. So, thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Sandy Vickery.
Thank you, Harold. So just to give you a little bit of history, and you've been on the council on and off in the past, you may remember that there was, I guess it was an ordinance, that you had to have a lot size of 7,000 feet or more before you could build an accessory dwelling unit on it. And then somewhere in the last probably 20 years, maybe even 15 or 10, that changed to 6,000 square feet. So you now just have to have a lot, it has to be at least 6,000 square feet before you can build an accessory dwelling unit on it, because the state realized that we needed more of those to be built. And then in answer to your question, I don't know how many accessory dwelling grand units that we have in the city of Winters. I know that there are 6 in John's subdivision. Maybe 4 of them are rented. I know one of them uses it just for storage. It's a glorified garage. But to my knowledge, there are 2 of them, of all the ones in Winters, that people use for Airbnb. One of them I know uses it for her family the majority of the time, and when family isn't there, then she will make it available as an Airbnb. It's not a full-time thing. My house at 305 Main Street, we purchased for my grandmother to live here. She outlived her children. Her 3 grandchildren were here in town, so we asked her if she would please move here so we could take care of her. And when she passed away, we started renting the house. So that house has been a rental for over 25 years. And 3 years ago, after Stan Clark and his mother Janine moved out, and they ran a business there, they had a bookkeeping business there, and I do believe they had a license to do that business there. I did a lot of major renovation to the property because nothing had been done in 25 years, bringing up the electrical, bringing up the plumbing, putting in a whole house fan, adding insulation, doing dual pane windows, things that needed to be done. But that's 3 years ago, so it's probably not current building codes. And I find it rather interesting that I could rent it for 25 years and it wasn't a problem and nobody cared what it was like inside. And all of a sudden, when I do it on the short term, and maybe you rent it out 4 nights a month, that it's like a big deal and somebody wants to, regulate all of that. I have no problem with anyone coming over and checking. I do have smoke detectors and I do have seal monitors. Who's going to do that inspection? Is one of my questions. I mean, Gene it's way below his pay scale, in my opinion. We need Gene to be taking care of the hotel and the new hotel out there. He needs to be someone else. I still think the $1,800 is a pretty exorbitant fee. It's more than Napa. And Napa, to me, that's a totally different demographics. I find it kind of interesting that we use that and Dauntville as a model for us. I did ask my assistant Cheryl to look into Murphy's and Angels Camp because I think they're a little more like Winters. They have all the downtown wineries and all that kind of vibe going on. But I don't think they are incorporated because we couldn't find any ordinance. So they're probably governed by county. So we did look into, at Auburn. So I just kind of caution you to maybe be a little, like Wade pointed out, current building code, there's some things in there, and I think it should be a simple, easy process. I don't think Gene should have to be the one to do all the inspections. It's not that hard to see if there's a smoke detector and a seal monitor. I do it myself, all the time. So, and I do agree with what Vinny said, and I just think we have to be careful. Are we going down a road that we're going to do this now, and next year we're going to be looking at putting all these rules on people who rent homes? I mean, all know we have a housing shortage for that. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Just so you know, not my subdivision, it should be called Sandy's subdivision. He actually was the one who sold us all of our houses. And it's, so the tally, I'll give you the tally is 1 granny, 1 Airbnb, 1 sister, and 3 rentals for the ADUs in my in Sandy's subdivision.
Okay, next we have Jack Vickery.
Good evening, council, fellow citizens. First, before I go into my comments, I want to make it expressly clear that I am here as myself, not my mother's son. I have no financial interest in her Airbnb. I don't deal with any of her business dealings. I'm here on my own accord. She has not asked me to be here.
Come on, Jack, go against her.
I am here as a consumer of Airbnb rentals. And I think that the only Airbnb rental in town that should be heavily regulated is 305 Main Street. My wife and I have been consumers of Airbnbs for probably over 7 years. We've stayed in Miami, Florida in an apartment. We've stayed in Savannah, Georgia in a townhome. We've stayed in Walla, California in a little, like a cabin, almost like an accessory dwelling unit. Similar, it was on property, so probably not within city limits. I don't know if that's necessarily considered the same thing. It was a 10-acre piece of property. This was a 700 square foot home or cabin, and she still had a home on the property. So here as a consumer, first, I would like to point out that we have a city hall that is trying to create an economic advisory position, trying to bring in businesses and support business and attract business. I think that this is setting a tone of going against that notion. The conditional use permits, I think, are purely restrictive, and I think that comes from members of the Planning Commission who have homes in town who do not necessarily agree with having short-term rentals. These are not required for hosted events, nor are they required for long-term rental properties. I think that this ordinance is not complete yet. I don't think it's ready to be adopted. And I would also like to ask Mr. Walsh if it's even in the Brown Act compliance, because we have one council member that's within 395 feet of one of the most popular Airbnbs in town, and two other planning commissioners who are outside the 500-foot mark, but they are within 700 feet of two Airbnb rentals in town. So I don't know if that's an issue or not.
Do you want me to cover that now?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it is okay, because this would apply to every single house in the entire city, because everyone will have the right to either rent their home as an Airbnb or not. So it applies to the public generally, because you don't know, although there are some Airbnbs right now, everyone could go tomorrow and decide to rent their house under Airbnb, so everyone would be subject to this ordinance equally. And so when something applies to the public generally, then you don't have a conflict, even if you're within whatever, 300 feet.
The 500-foot rule.
So yeah, we did consider that, and I do think it's okay for everyone to vote.
Okay, perfect. Great. Yeah, I think that this ordinance is a good foundation. I think it's on its way. There's obviously been a lot of work put into it, but I don't think it's quite ready to be adopted. I would recommend that it go back to the planning commission for some more. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that was the last sheet I had turned in on this agenda item. Is there anyone else who would like to speak on this subject? Okay. Any comments or questions, direction from council?
Well, I honestly thought I was ready to vote. After having that presentation, I'm not sure. But I think I was the one who asked last time, is there a rush to get this done? Are we holding up business, or are we keeping funds out of the city? If it's something that doesn't need to be done tonight, and we can make it better than it is written at this moment, I would be willing to see a rewrite. And so I guess that's my question.
So I guess my question would be, which parts do you think need to be rewritten?
Well, the parts that Jack just brought up, certainly. As far as, land use, the lot overlay, or whatever we call it. A permit to have a non owner in place at all times.
John, can you address the reasoning behind why the planning commission recommended having a conditional use permit for non-hosted?
Yeah. So a conditional use permit is typically applied, especially in the residential zone, for some type of home occupancy that somebody wants to run a business. In this case, what does the CUP do? Number one, it gives a notification to all the neighbors. There's a list of conditions that directly accrue to the property. There's an allowance for appeals that go into the CUP. In this case, it just accrued because and Benny gave a good example. Somebody wants to give haircuts out of their house, or in the past we had the whole discussion about massages out of your house. Those all apply to customers going to and from a house which is running a business within the residential zone. In this case, for the non-hosted, there are extenuating circumstances. In the case of a hosted, all the people are going to need to do is come in. They're going to get a business license. They're going to fill out an application. In the case of the one-time inspection, we can probably have, Sandy's right, probably anybody can go out and do the fire life safety thing. But in the case of a CUP, it extends basically to the fact that this is going to be a business run out of a property in the residential zone, that it just attaches conditions. It's a one-time fee that's paid by the individual, and I think the only thing they're going to have to get after that is a business license. But the non-hosted facilities are obviously the more controversial of the type, so the ability to have the folks come in and go through the CUP process. By the way, the fee that is that is set for us is done from our fee study. If for some reason we thought this was overly simple, we could probably address that with the $1,820 is straight out of our current fee structure based on a fee study.
But in theory, the type of business that's being run out of a short-term rental, no different if it's hosted or not hosted, it's the same type of business, correct?
Well, one is supervised with somebody on site, the other is, for the most part, unsupervised.
So that's the only difference. So.
Yeah, that's the difference, and quite frankly, it was viewed as the big difference.
Public comment closed.
Well, you come back to the microphone if you'd like.
I want to make one more point. In regards to, whether there's egresses and the fees and everything, making that, the point I was trying to make is that when you have the fee structure and it makes it cost prohibitive for somebody to have an Airbnb, Airbnbs are great because for us, when we've traveled with friends or family. We've gone to Savannah, Georgia. We met our friends from Florida. We rented a townhome, and it was $220 for a night for the townhome, and it was $180 for a one-bedroom hotel room. And for them, our friends, and us to each get a hotel room, have a small confined space, it was a no-brainer to rent the townhome, have a kitchen, have a full-blown house, have parking. In Morro Bay, we stayed with my in-laws, and same thing, we were able to bring families together from outside areas and have all this space, right, to get together. I was gonna make one other point, I just drew.
Small talk.
No.
Bring your.
Yeah, I'm only 34. Is this sad? Shoot. Well, now I'm embarrassed. I interrupted you. So my apologies. If I think about it, can I get it?
So I just, two things that came out of looking at the other cities, which again, I'm not suggesting you continue, but you could. Obviously, two cities don't require a hoster to go through any special process except registering with the city, paying the business license and their TOT. Clearly a direction that we could go. The ADU thing, I don't know how the council feels about it. If the state ultimately adopts legislation that says you can't use it for that purpose, we'll have to come back and address it at that point, if we will allow them in the interim. John's already talked about the CUP. Two cities don't allow non-hosted facilities at all. And I bet if I looked at a lot of other cities, you'd find there's probably a fair number that don't allow non-hosted facilities. And Yountville, of course, allows neither. So that's another topic. I'm happy to work on this thing until it's almost perfect. I don't think it'll ever be perfect, but I kind of need some idea as to what are the issues that you want me to focus on. I mean, we can send it back to the planning commission, but
the planning commission worked on this for a year.
Yeah.
And we going 3 ways on it. The planning commission, there was a lot of thought into it, and I can tell you through the process breaking it down, I think it was before the planning commission 4 or 5 times. So it's probably as good as we're gonna get.
What I'm seeing, the areas that we're talking about mostly are the conditional use permit for non-hosted, whether or not we need to have that. And then whether or not we're gonna allow the ADUs to use as a short-term rental. The language for fire and safety. And the other one would be the fees. I like your suggestion of the hosted, just having these very simple things.
They still have to follow the regulations, they just wouldn't have to go through an application process per se, where they would apply and have to go through a hearing.
For a hosted.
Right, hosted is sort of a lesser hearing process than a CUP,
They go through a hearing.
but they still go through a hearing.
And that also means that the neighbors aren't notified.
Correct, correct.
The issue with not going through the CUP for the non-hosted is the fact that it then becomes a code enforcement and a legal issue. The ability to revocate that then becomes a process of the city attorney and the city having to generate things. Again, this is a business enterprise being run in a residential zone, and the CUP allows for essentially a contract between the city and that property owner to go ahead and do this thing. They can do it. If you really boil down to everything that's in the ordinance, it's pretty simple. There are some simple rules that the neighbors get notified. Absent that, if you don't have some type of a conditional use permit, then it becomes a code enforcement and a legal issue, which is completely different.
I appreciate that explanation.
So yeah, as much as I don't like to add additional regulations on any type of things that are, coming in, adding more red tape, I think in this case to me, I think that conditional use permit should apply to non-hosted units because there is the risks are higher. It's a different business type, I think, based on number of not having the owner on the property, overseeing it. I know one of the requirements, they have to be available within 24 hours. But it just seems like, having, I guess, the question would be, what kind of conditions would be put on it by the planning commission? They look at location in proximity to other short-term rentals?
It could be a lot of things. Parking is one of the things they talk about a lot. So your ability to provide the parking for the guests that would be staying. And then I don't know until you have an actual application, what the physical surroundings are in relation to that proposed use.
And some of the things that are outlined in here is the number of people that are allowed to be in the unit. So it's kind of stepping through things a little bit, but once they've gone through the process, there are clear established ground rules for them. They just go, and it's not something that has to be revisited.
So if I remember correctly, it says they can do up to 10 people.
Up to 10 based on the bedroom,
in either
number of bedrooms.
Hosted or not hosted.
Correct. Well, the planning commission, as a compromise, said for a non-hosted facility, which goes through the use permit process, you theoretically could go above 10 if you could meet other parts of the ordinance as to parking and other regulations. So they have that flexibility built in, but otherwise 10 would be the limit. It's bedroom count that determines how many people.
The way the ordinance is currently written, it does not allow ADUs to be used as short-term.
Correct. And our existing ADU ordinance is silent on it, so we wouldn't be in conflict there.
Yes. Would you like
Public comments still, and I was like, one quick.
Actually, no.
I think the idea of, John brought up that the unhosted rental is supervised, but I think we need to be very clear here. The requirement is that the owner sleeps at the property, is that correct?
Well, yes, somewhere on the property.
And so, the idea that it's supervised, think of supervised as, if you drop your kids off at daycare, right, they're being watched. The idea that the only requirement is that the person sleeps there at night. So if they get home at, 1 in the morning, there's still the same risks there. And to say that, a non-hosted rental is not supervised, once again, it kind of gives the illusion that, it's just, well, here's the keys are in the, under the mat and go have a good time. The idea that it's not supervised, I think, is a lot different than saying the requirement is that somebody lives on the property. So I think to make this big distinction, I'm not saying that it's not the same risks, because inevitably, right, if somebody's not there, there's generally going to be more people in a non-hosted rental. But the idea that one is completely supervised and the one is not at all, I think is a stretch, a large stretch.
Thank you. Comments?
Me again. I helped Dave write this. We went word by word to do this before it even went to the planning commission. I do not feel it needs to go back to the planning commission. I think we're very close to having this thing nailed down and perfected. I think you have 3 good points. Dave, I'm happy to help you again, if you would like me. I'm happy to do that. But the only thing I ask, if you give us a month, because what happens when it's 2 weeks out is he has to have this thing already in your packet like a week before, and so you really only have a week.
That's
Fair?
correct.
So if you could give us a month, and we come back to the end of September, whenever that is, I really think we can have something that's really good, that's going to address all of the issues that have been brought up tonight. I think they're all really valid points, and I think we can have something that you're going to be really happy and proud of. Thank you.
To address Councilmember New's earlier question, is there a rush? I guess, to me, there's not a rush. I don't feel like there's a rush to do it.
If you were to take Sandy's advice, and I think Ethan's okay with this, then I'll let him speak for himself. Again, I'd suggest continuing it to a date certain, which would be September 17th. Can we do that far out?
I think at this point, we're talking about making a little more significant changes potentially. And
So
so,
revisit.
I think we're gonna bring it back. As a step, we're gonna do it up here.
Okay, that's fine. That would give us time to do that.
Maybe the council give us direction. We probably should go back to the planning commission.
It would be helpful to have.
If we could get some
specific things
direction.
that you want. I agree with what Sandy said, I think there's enough concerns that, and there may be some solutions that we can come to that will alleviate some of the concerns and the cost of one of the concerns, so we can talk about that. But if you kind of pinpoint the specific areas that you want us to address, and then David and Sandy, maybe with some of my help too.
Yeah, I'll take a stab at part of it anyway. For me, it's, of course, the ADU part. I think we should allow it until which time the state dictates otherwise. That's my opinion. And then, the cleanup of just a little bit of dropping a couple of words about the inspection part, I think that's more doable for everybody. And then as far as I agree with Sandy. I don't think it needs to go back to planning commission. I think we just got maybe 3 things here and we could be done with this. But I also agree with the mayor. We're in no rush. We're already collecting the TFT, so there's no financial gain by pushing this through tonight. As far as the fee for the non-hosted and the conditional use permit, I see both sides of that one, but I do feel there needs to be more involvement from staff and from the whole process for a non-hosted, because I totally understand what the city manager's saying with, now you're running a business out of a residential unit without the owner living there. So that's definitely a different animal than if somebody's there. There's no question to that, to me. And then it also gives the opportunity for what we talked about earlier, which is, and I think somebody brought this up maybe at the last meeting, and I think again at this meeting, is we don't want to see an entire block of Airbnbs. Nobody wants to see that. And having this little bit further review enables us to look at the map and say, oh, we already got 2 on this street. Do we really want a 3rd one? You know, it gives us kind of an opportunity there for that. I'm totally with the mayor on, I'm never in favor of more regulation. I'm never in favor of more fees. You know, I would like to have just at least a little more justification for $1,820, because that does seem like a lot to me. You know, I see the need for some amount of fee if it's gonna, you know, take the staff time to prepare a staff report and take a little review with the planning commission, but I don't know. I think there should be some weight put into the fact that you're gonna collect TOT from them forever. So it's not like you're never getting any money out of these people once they walk back out the door. So I think that deserves a little consideration, and maybe we could do 50% of the fee, knowing that we're gonna get the rest in TOT down the road. So for something that if they don't have it, we never get any money from them. So I think we could look at the fee more a little bit.
What's the current fee rate?
Anyway, I know we've got a fee study that kind of dictates some of this, but
To put in perspective, this isn't just anything on it. Because before the planning commission, there's notification to all the neighbors.
Yeah.
So there's,
I know
there's
that costs
mailing,
money.
so there's letters that go out to do all of that. We have to generate conditions that go before those. There's a public hearing before the planning commission. So all those things start adding a little bit of cost into it. So at the end of the day, it's not like the city's necessarily bad off with this. Our fees have to break even on things.
I do understand it's a one-time thing too, which also makes a difference, that it's not an annual.
Well, I don't want this to go to Councilman Callan's head, and I agree with what he
I would agree. I don't think it needs to go back to the planning commission. I mean, the part about the ADUs, they debated that already, and they decided, and they voted on it, that ADUs, in their opinion, should not be allowed. Council wants to change that, that's all for others, but I think sending it back to them, probably gonna vote the same way. So I don't think it's worth sending back for that. The things we need to look at, I think, is like you said, is there any way we can lower the fees for the conditional use permit somehow?
Well, you can, and I'll propose this and it comes back. Let me propose something when it comes back.
Yeah.
Rather than answer you off the top.
Can we have a list of conditions? Here's things.
I can give you some that I would expect would be fairly typical. It wouldn't necessarily apply
It
to
might
every
not
case.
Cover everything, but you could maybe have a list of conditions.
And some of them, like a lot of conditions of approval, are gonna be reciting what the law already says, like having to do with noise and that kind of stuff. But we often do that with conditional use permits. But yeah, I could come up with a typical list that I would expect. But I would agree with Sandy, if we're gonna do the, definitely can't do it by the next meeting, but rather second meeting in September and maybe.
So we got 3 main topics then, right?
Yeah. So the ADU,
Yeah, and I think
life
the
safety, and
lower fee.
Yeah, see what we can do with the fee and clean up the language on the inspection part.
Yeah.
So that's,
There's a big assumption that non-occupied is gonna be more unruly than occupied. not always going to be true.
The owner might be a party animal.
Everybody's gone out about it. Neighbors about it, the entire block. Taken out. They were just- because of that, over 10 extension. You're gonna have some kind.
So by having it go through a conditional use permit hearing, we can ensure that we don't have several of them.
Yeah, so planning commission actually indirectly addressed that early on. Napa puts a limit on how many. The planning commission really said, we aren't Napa. It's not become a problem. If it becomes a problem, then we can always come back and put limits.
Wasn't there originally some language in there that said couldn't be within so many feet of each other? Do you remember that?
Just numbers, it was just numbers, yeah. And the commission didn't feel that this time was necessary to regulate how many.
Not agree with them.
About how many to have or how many people to be, because they're, what they have in there now is how many people can be in one maximum number of people. Right? They can justify, say they have 6 bedrooms in a house with 2 people in each bedroom, then they can justify having 12 people in there.
And then the parking also comes in play. Yeah, I think there's only a handful of examples where that would conceivably happen, but there is the potential. There's some older, larger homes in this town that could probably do that.
And there's a property in town, you have a number of units on it, potentially could have
Even
more than 10.
So,
My last comment.
so Ethan, if we're not continuing to date certain, then I can just assume that the commission, or council wants me to come back, take it to the commission. And the 17th, I think, is a workable date. Sandy and I can get together in the room.
Honestly, it should probably go back to the planning commission.
What we're gonna do, Dave, is we're gonna take the council's comments and then we're gonna discuss what the next step is gonna be, but I do think we need to go back. And part of this is, I think what we're talking about here is, I understand the concern about the fees and the conditional use permits, and so I think part of what Dave and I should do, is talk about that process, the process, because part of the issue is with the CUP, if we're going to utilize the CUP mechanism, there is we have a fee that's established, and there is a cost associated with that, because there's a hearing that you have to do, there's noticing, and there's costs associated with that, and we figured out what the reasonable costs of that are. So one of the things that we need to discuss is potentially if there's a process that we can go through that's maybe something a little less than that, that's less costly than the city. And so but that's a more significant change to the ordinance that would likely have to go back to the planning commission. So if we do want to address that issue, which it sounds like you do, it's probably worth taking that additional step.
And you're gonna hate hearing this, but we would have to do a fee study if you want to not go with the CUP that we have right now. We cannot just arbitrarily just come up with a fee. That's against state law. So if we don't want to go with the CUP number that we have on the books, I guess we just have to go hire a consultant and bring him in and have them study it.
No, I don't think any of us want to do that.
Nobody
I'll go
wants
with
to
the
fee
fee.
it.
Do you have any more questions, comments?
And one last comment.
Okay.
Don't forget we got a hotel across the street.
Hotel opening soon across the street. Thursday. All right, so what's the direction from the council? Can we
Bring it back number
bring it back on Should we send, Ethan's suggestion is we send it back to.
Yeah, you've given us the direction on what we want, and so we'll take it back through the process, and bring it back to you addressing the issues.
Okay. We motion or is?
No, that's sufficient.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Thank you everybody for your comments. Next item on our agenda. Find my place here. Consideration of resolution replacing council resolution 2001-05 and clarifying that the council shall consider whether to initiate the process of any development entitlements for projects outside of the 30-minute line set forth in city code. So this was an item that I asked to be brought back to us when it came up earlier this year when it was the draft proposal was submitted to the city via email. It was just a draft, but it was sent in for our review. The determination at that time was that the ordinance that we have in place that was developed in 2001 did not apply to that particular piece of development that they're talking about doing. And as I looked at it closer and closer, I thought, in my opinion, I thought it did. So I asked talked to Ethan, and he has had discussions with our contract planner, Heidi Sheehan, who is here tonight, and she's going to lay it out for us on what we've come up with on this tonight.
Thank you very much. Heidi Cheatham, Contract City Planner. So that's a great introduction, and maybe just to add to it a little bit more. The initial understanding of what was being proposed as part of the north area, and then what was documented in a preliminary submittal from them gave a little bit more detail, and I think you're correct, Mayor, that in looking at it, based on the additional detail, both Ethan and myself do feel that were that to come through at this time, it would be subject to the resolution. So that's an important point, and related to that, there's been some discussion about a few items that are not as clear in that resolution as they could be to guide us in the future. And so what we've identified here tonight is what I would categorize as 4 main changes to the resolution that we're proposing to you, so that it would keep the main intent of the resolution, but it would clarify it in 4 ways. The first has to do with the scope of what it encompasses. So the wording right now refers to development outside of the urban limit line. And the additional clarification would be all applications for development projects. So it's a little bit more clear about what we're capturing, that it will be all development projects and applications involving planning entitlements for those development projects. So it makes it much more clear what we would be including. And then it would also clarify the geographic reach. So right now what it says is the city's general plan area, which isn't a precisely defined term. So the proposal is to change it to capture a project located in whole or in part outside of the urban limit line, which is the defined area that's shown in color, basically, on the land use map. So everything that's shown in color, which does include properties that are outside of the city limits, but within your sphere of influence. The fourth is it identifies more of a process. So for example, it says that the council directs that all applications for development or planning entitlements for any project located in whole or in part outside of the urban limit line will go through this process, and the process would involve that the applicant would be required to submit a letter of intent to submit an application. So that actually catches it before the application comes in, because for some of these larger projects, there's a considerable amount of time and money expended just to prepare the application. And for something that's of this concern, potentially to the council and the community, the idea is to have the chance to give them direction before they go through that expense and before it gets to a point where the community feels like it's beyond a chance where they've had to have input. The other thing is it would allow us to identify a fee that would be associated with processing it. So we would specifically be looking at the letter of intent. We'd have the fee to cover it. It would come to you. And so that's really the fourth part that I wanted to identify, is the clarification of what you would be doing with it at that time. So you would either direct the staff to process it, which I want to clarified doesn't mean you're in favor of that project or opposed to that project. It merely means that you want to give that project a chance to be explored. So that would be one choice. Or your other choice is that if the application is still submitted, so you've given direction, you've said, we don't want to see it, but this potential applicant decides to submit anyway, then the second choice would be that the staff would be directed to schedule it for consideration of denial. That's a little bit different wording than the other one as well, which said for denial, which is in effect telling your council what to do, and that's not really how it should be worded. So it would give your council a chance to consider denial, but you also wouldn't have to at that point. You could also decide at that point to let it go through the process. But you wouldn't be making a decision to approve anything until you had everything in front of you if you allowed it to move forward. So those are the four kind of main areas of clarification that we're proposing for the resolution, but the intent of the resolution is the same, that if any part of an application includes something that's outside of that colored area, that it has to come in front of your council for consideration. I'm happy to answer any questions and suggest that you also allow for public input.
So yeah, one question I have is just, we want to make sure, I want to make sure that we're covering, that people are clear. Before, there was kind of a technicality, they hadn't submitted a development application versus a planning application. So now the definitions will all be covered, whether it's a specific plan, a planning application, or any type.
That's correct, and it also clarifies, part of the problem that I saw with the last time was it wasn't clear that all of the property that was being considered for application by that applicant was going to be part of the submittal. So there was actually a misunderstanding about what he was proposing or contemplating moving forward with. This makes it clear any part of it is outside of that area. For any type of application, as you just suggested, it would come through the process.
And does, like the email that they sent in January, the owners of that property sent, it was a draft, would that be considered a letter of intent?
I don't know that I would consider that a letter of intent, but what this guidance would tell us is once we knew somebody was contemplating something like that, we would recommend to them to submit a letter of intent so that they don't go through a lot of expense on their part, submit something, and then have to come through the process and bring it in front of you. Now, they may still choose to do that, and that is their right to do that, but our process will still be in place, and we'll still capture it and bring it forward. So if they spend $50,000 to submit an application, it's still going to come in front of you, and you may decide that that's not something you're willing to entertain because it's outside of this area where the community has already identified, the bounds of the community should be.
Councilmember Anderson, you were on the council at the time when that resolution was originally put together. Do you have any background that you can share with us on when that was put together and kind of reasoning behind it? Okay, that's fine. Any comments? Anything you'd like to say on it?
Well, I think it's a step in the right direction.
Questions before I open the public hearing? Yes.
You said that if the applicant decided to submit a project plan, even if we said no, and that plan goes to our office and our personnel, our staff has to work on it. Do they have to pay for our staff time, or are we just giving up staff time?
You're not giving up staff time. The fee would be established to cover what we believe to be an average cost for something like that. When these bigger applications are actually allowed to go through the process, your jurisdiction, just like every other jurisdiction in the state, does a reimbursement type of arrangement. Because there's no way to estimate an average amount of cost because they're also different and specific. So what typically happens if a project is going through, and as I said, this is true with every city and county I've worked with, is there's usually an estimate of the amount of money that would be involved for the city. And then an agreement is entered into with the applicant to place a deposit. And you can structure those deposits so that they stay ahead of the approximate pace of the expenditure of city funds to process it. Now, that's a little bit different though from what you asked me. So what you asked me about though is when it first comes in the door, would we be able to have a fee that covers that initial part of the process, the resolution basically that we're talking about?
You answered my question.
Okay,
It's
good.
fine.
Good.
The other thing is, I heard and I wrote down, and I don't know if there was something that preceded what I wrote down, said all project letters of intent will come to the council. Was there something before that that I didn't hear, or is it that all project letters of intent come to the council?
Outside of the
It's
urban limit.
for projects that satisfy the two criteria here.
Oh,
So,
that's exactly what I wanted to know.
okay,
So
if it's an
it has-
application that is for a development or planning entitlement, and if any portion of that proposed project area would be located outside of the colored in area, then the letter of intent would be requested. If that applicant chose not to do that, and as we were talking about, submitted an application anyway, then that application will be brought to you right off the bat.
Okay, I have another question then. If a developer wishes to submit any development or planning proposal that is entirely within the urban limit line, and some of the property is not within the city limits, would that then force the city to allow the proposed project to be annexed?
No. So I'm gonna step over to the map for just a moment. So for example, this area right here is within the urban limit line,
Right,
but outside of the city limits.
right.
So your general plan has been contemplating growth there. But in order to actually grow there, an applicant would have to go through general plan amendment and annexation because it's outside of city limits, probably other entitlements.
Okay. So their plan, even though the plan was improved, it still would have to come back and be annexed into the city, and that would have to come before the city council.
Yes, and that actually would, so what would happen in a situation like that is first there would be, let's assume it's a specific plan just for the sake of discussion. So a specific plan application would come in. You would hear and process that. You would actually be planning, in effect, for land that is not within your control to plan, but that's okay because it is in your sphere of influence. And then that applicant, if they were eventually able to secure an approval from you, the next thing they would have to do then is apply to LAFCO. Actually, the city does it jointly with them and apply for the annexation to occur. So it's actually a second step in the process.
Okay.
And we'll talk a lot more about those steps in the process in the workshop tomorrow.
Tomorrow.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I haven't been comfortable with this. And I actually wrote another resolution to replace it, which I sent to Ethan, and he said it had problems, so I'm not trying to propose that.
Okay.
But I'm trying to get comfortable with what is being presented tonight.
Well, they're important questions, and if there's other aspects of this that you or the public, want to talk about, we're here to do that with you this evening, so. It's a complicated issue, even though it's a short little resolution. It's very complicated.
I've changed my mind on it 3 days in a row.
I understand.
Okay, I think you've answered one of my other questions. Okay. I'll keep thinking. Yes, open it up, I may come back.
Any other questions? We're not holding a public hearing, correct, Ethan?
Right.
We are taking public comments, so I have some papers that were turned in. And we'll start with the first one I have here, and that's Al Vallecillo.
Good evening, council. Al Vallecillo, 210 Main Street. It's not, well, it sort of directly came from this resolution showing up on your agenda. And it's concerning me a lot because the language in what was proposed before was cleaned up. It seemed very ambiguous, with lots of holes in it. So I appreciate that it's been looked at to be corrected. But what I'm here to ask you to do is to direct your staff to prepare a defined urban limit line, because now that's cropped up again, We just started talking about that this week. So it started appearing in publications and things. The SOI, sphere of influence, thank you. And then the general plan area, which Heidi just mentioned, is kind of a nebulous kind of thing. It only appears on that map when you look at it. So I'm asking you to direct staff to develop a graphic with definitions of which thing is, very simply graphic, defining things, and then kind of showing them all existent with each other so that ordinary citizens can look at it and say, oh, that's what they're talking about. Because when you talk to people in the community, there is a lot of confusion. And the way people talk about it, when you're on the dais and you're sitting there, people are using words just now. Heidi used different terms for some of the same things. So people get confused. And I think that confusion sort of really goes against what he's trying to get accomplished. And it causes a lot of consternation and concern from the members of the community. So I just asked for some definitions and some very clear, simple diagrams. And maybe tomorrow night, something like that, may be already prepared. I don't know, but I'm putting it as a suggestion or request of you, or to direct someone to do it. Thank you.
Thank you. Next one I have is from Susan Hamilton.
Hello, Susan Hamilton, 2727 County Road 87. And I just want to second what Gail said. This is an issue that affects the whole community. And many people feel that you guys have too much power over how our city is shaped. The annexation is going to affect the town and just tremendously if it goes ahead as has been proposed. So I'm asking that this be put before popular vote, that we in the city get to vote on what happens in our city. Thanks.
I have one also from Jeff Tempest.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Jeff Tempest, 24 East Main Street. I guess, thank you, Heidi. I think the students in the presentation was good, and thank you for, trying to get clarity on this. I think that, the point made with respect to consideration of development proposals outside the urban limit line, that, the white space out there, it's like, yeah, it did make sense that city staff shouldn't be conducting, and the developer shouldn't be spending a lot of money preparing plans until we have the sense of the community on, whether we're going in that direction. I guess I have the sense that, I think myself and probably quite a few members of the community, if I could step over here, it's like there are these two big blocks that are outside the city boundaries, but in the urban limit line. And it's a big decision to go ahead and say we're going to annex those. And I think, from the city's perspective, it's like if we go forward and have a developer come in and talk to city staff and invest in a proposal to develop that whole block of properties there, we're suddenly looking at a big development proposal. But behind that is this other decision that has to be made about annexation. And it kind of, isn't the annexation kind of the first important decision that has to be made? I think if I understood Ms. Shuden correctly, we could actually approve a proposal where we didn't have the annexation yet. And that, to me, would seem to really prejudice that bigger, more important question of, do we want to jump into annexation and jump into developing that much more property? right off the bat. I mean, doesn't the same kind of principle apply that we should make that annexation decision first before the city spends a lot of money or a lot of time discussing that development with the developer, and the developer spends, hundreds of thousands of dollars coming up with a plan that is a development that, has some in and some outside the city. And we don't know, and without knowing whether the sense of the council or whether the sense of the community is that we want to go there yet. I mean, same principle seems to apply. And it seems to me that, I think the memo said something about this, the extension of the zone of influence is a legislative decision that the council needs to make. If I understand it correctly, annexation will also be a legislative decision that jointly made by the council and LAFCO, is that?
These are great questions you're asking, you and Susan as well. These are all things that will be covered tomorrow night in the workshop. And we appreciate you bringing them up, and we will discuss them in much more detail tomorrow. What we have before us tonight is the resolution, just basically talking about which parts, if it's outside, we're trying to clarify that resolution that's in place. You are bringing up some great questions, and those are things that we will be talking about.
I appreciate bringing it back to the resolution, because I guess my question is why wouldn't we have this resolution also address the question, this other question, the annexation, whether we should be discussing development and annexation. It's such a, inseparable, I mean, it's such a parallel topic.
So are you asking that the area that is in our sphere of influence but outside the city limits be included in this resolution as well?
Yeah, that's what I would suggest would be.
And I think that probably goes back to what's already in our general plan, and it's spelled out in the general plan, which, where we plan to grow in the future, we've zoned for that already. And that type of thing.
It seems then that.
Want to clarify anything?
It seems then that we are, I mean, have we no capacity then to say, no, we don't want to discuss, or we want the developer to first address us on the issue of annexation before the council, and with the council rather than, or have it brought to the council whether we want to discuss annexation before we discuss development? Is that not possible? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff.
I just want to do the workshop tonight, because there's so many great questions, but we're not noticed to do the workshop tonight, so I have to be cautious. The quick answer is that what this resolution is doing is clarifying really a procedure that you already have in place. And there's been, as I understand it, a recognition by this council that it merited clarification. It certainly does, in my opinion, given that we already, I think, made a misstep with how it's even applied to something that's been very controversial in front of the community already. So from my perspective, I think it is a very good thing for you to clarify this. I don't think this presupposes any decisions about the community discussion we're going to have tomorrow and any decisions that may come out of that. And I think if there was a point in time when your council decided to modify that map or whatever you decide to do, if there was a need to come back to this resolution and clarify it, you certainly could. So I think I can say that I'm comfortable advising you that this is a good step to take tonight, because it's really clarifying something that's already in place. And then we can kind of see what happens with the discussion tomorrow. There's a lot of suggested direction for the council to give us tomorrow, and we can figure out how to go from there. And we'll be in a better position to answer those questions because we'll be fully noticed, and I can, tell you my thoughts about it, and Ethan can weigh in as well, and we can really discuss it like I know people want to, but I'm reluctant to do that tonight because we're not really noticed to do that, so I apologize for that.
Sure, and I would just note, the issues that Jeff raised are, they're good policy issues for discussion, but I also do think that, in the event that we were going to adopt something like that, we couldn't get from what we have here to there anyways. If that was where you wanted to go, I would suggest that you would tell us to go back and rework the resolution in any event. It just, if you didn't want it off this, that's fine. But you would, it would be beyond doing modifications to this one and going to kind of a whole other area. And like Heidi said, these are they may not seem like it, but they are very complex issues. And she and I spent a lot of time on this, and if we were going to go in a different direction, we want to spend the equal amount of time to make sure we handle this on a good
But I think I interrupted your flow just to answer that question.
Because you may need to help me clarify. I wanted to address some of the questions or comments that Mr. Biassio brought up about defining some of these terms. So you do have, with this resolution, you have the attachment A.
Yes.
Which basically has that map on it, has attachment A. And it's defined, the urban limit line is defined in the general plan as that specific area. So
That's
that
correct.
is defined with the, this map helps to show people, this is exactly what area we're talking about for development. Sphere of influence, we don't have the definition, but
So we can bring maps tomorrow and we can discuss that, and we absolutely can compile a map for your council chambers that shows all those things. I can help with that if that's appropriate, but you're correct for the action tonight. The urban limit line is defined by the graphic that's on the back, which is essentially that graphic, and it refers to everything that's in color.
I think, excuse me, for purposes of our discussion tonight in this resolution, that is spelled out pretty clearly with that attachment A. I'm okay with the way it's
Color, the whole thing's in color.
Yes.
Mass. Jaime, will tomorrow's workshop help clarify this in?
I think it will, yes. I
Okay.
think, well, one of the intents, I think, for the workshop is to try to give everybody a common understanding of terms, to Mr. Biasio's point, and kind of where you have authority and what type of authority you have based on whether it's inside or outside of a line, and whether it's recognized or not recognized by LAFCO, and really explaining those terms that, you're right, they roll off my tongue because I've been doing this for 40 years, but okay, so LAFCO is Local Area Formation Commission. Taking some time to walk through all those things and trying to give a common base of understanding for what it sounds like will be then a series of community workshops, discussions. I'm not sure what all the parts are gonna be, but that will depend on the direction from the council.
I have another question. Heidi's the one that asked this too. I'm asking this because I was working on something to substitute in it, and it didn't fly. But what I want to know, and I think I understand this, would a developer who submitted a plan to the city without council consideration of the appropriateness of the city reviewing plan, so it's not reviewed, would that result in if that resulted in the need to annex land, would the first time that it comes back to council be when the actual plan is submitted in collaboration with the city staff? I mean, when they start talking about annexation, when does the city, if it doesn't come to the city council, when does the city find out about a plan?
If it's a legislative act, so if it's, let's say, a general plan amendment or an annexation, and it's in the, well, actually, I need to ask you a question. So in your scenario, are we talking about inside the colored area or outside the colored area? So if it's outside the colored area, it's going to be captured by this resolution.
Mm-hmm.
So let's assume it's somebody submitting an application tomorrow for that.
Okay,
Okay?
I can do that.
Okay. So this resolution would not automatically trigger that it come before you before we process it.
Mm-hmm.
So we would do what we're obligated to do by law, which is to start to process it. But because that involves legislative approvals, The first time you got a report on it as a planning activity by the city manager, if you so chose, you could direct that it come before you for consideration. Would you disagree with that, Ethan?
No.
So you can still do that for any legislative approval. Whether you wish to or not, or whether it makes sense to or not, is a different issue. The presumption when you adopt a plan like this for any jurisdiction is that you're telling the world, these are our community values, this is what we expect to see. In essence, we welcome you to do what's on this map, you know, if you're interested in doing it as a property owner or a representative. And so that messaging that's kind of embodied in planning and zoning law for the state of California kind of says, this is what we expect. The point that you're making with your resolution is that if somebody wants to do something out here, you're saying, no, we haven't as a community decided what to do out there. Now, we may be willing to listen, but we may not be. We may figure we've got our hands full with what we've already identified in our urban limit line. So that's what this resolution kind of gives you the opportunity to consider.
So are you saying that we could request of the city manager for all plans that go before, that don't come before the city council, that he notifies us what's happening?
So note, yes, you can, we're actually going to talk about tomorrow a recommendation of having a regular report on planning activity. And I think you get some of that now, but this would be more of a formal thing. We're going to talk about that tomorrow. But you have to realize, at least to a planner, every day that somebody comes in for a building permit, that's a development activity. That's really a developer. So if you say, we want to have the opportunity to say yes or no on processing every application that the city receives, first of all, and I don't mean this to be critical, but I don't think that's legal, because there are certain activities where due process comes into play and you are required to consider the application. You don't have to approve it, but you are required to hear what somebody wants to do with their property. The reason I made the distinction for legislative acts is you are not required to hear a legislative act. But if it's within that area, you're at least telling the community, by having adopted this, that you are willing to listen to applications within that area. What this item this evening, though, is talking about is that you're saying we may or may not be willing to entertain applications for area outside of that. And that's the focus of this evening.
Thank you, and you actually answered my question.
Terrific.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I'll just make a couple of comments, but I'm really glad that you had this brought back. And I think it's important, the cleanup that's been done on this from Heidi and Ethan is exactly what needed to be done with this. And I look forward to hopefully getting this passed.
Comments? Okay, no other comments, then do we have some more public comment? As long as it's pertaining to this resolution, if it's something other than that, let's save it for our workshop tomorrow night. If we can.
I would just suggest or ask for a question. If, as I mentioned earlier, the community expressed a desire to consider all this through annexation, so forth, through a ballot measure, where would that measure step into the program? If we want to have a ballot measure on this, where do we step in?
So when you say consider this, what are we talking about considering?
The whole general,
Outside of our-
considering the general
General
plan
plan
change
development?
by ballot.
Can you address that, Ethan?
That would be a completely different issue. Not, what we're talking about right here is if someone came in with a proposal to develop outside of our existing area, then it would have to come before the council. If there was a valid initiative to amend the general plan, then that would go through the process that is, set forth in California code to deal with ballot measures. And so that wouldn't come before you in this context.
And that would be something, say, taking some of the areas outside of our city limit that is in our sphere of influence, taking that out of the general plan. But that if there was a ballot request asking for that, is that something?
Yeah, that would go through the process dictated by state law. We couldn't, we don't have the authority to, restrict people's ability to bring forward a referendum or initiative or anything like that. So it wouldn't restrict that authority at all.
That would be something that citizens could do. If you want to bring forth a ballot measure, there's that possibility. Is that what they did in Davis years back?
For,
developments that come forward
right,
to the city,
yeah.
they passed a ballot on it.
Right, it's measure, I believe what they did is they initially passed it, yeah, they passed the ballot measure and they did.
That would be something that citizens would bring.
Well, the city planner mentioned that it's going to be commented on tomorrow, the 3.5 hour meeting. And that's why I wanted to know that. Is it going to be considered or could be entered at that time?
Could what be entered?
A consideration for annexation or changes to the general plan.
Tomorrow?
They're having a meeting tomorrow.
Tomorrow, it's just a discussion. There's not going to be any action taken for anything along those lines. It's essentially a workshop to help educate the community on some of the issues that Heidi started to talk about tonight. And we'll be providing more detailed discussion for that tomorrow. But no, you're not going to bring forward any proposals related to annexation.
So there will be no new proposals tomorrow?
No.
Okay.
It's just a discussion of what the process is for any kind of development, specifically in that area. We'll talk about all the different steps that you have to go through if you're going to consider developing up there.
Well, is this a public hearing tomorrow or just an invitation or what?
It's a joint council and planning commission workshop. There'll be presentation by staff. And then there will be questions and comments from council and planning commissioners. And then after that, we'll open it up for public comments.
But not a public hearing?
Well, public
Recognized
comments,
hearing?
not a recognized public hearing, but we will be receiving public comments.
Okay.
Mr. Hunter.
Peter Hunter, 28472 County Road 87B. I wasn't going to say anything tonight, but I'm going to really try to stick on this resolution.
Thank you.
And I think in light of the workshop tomorrow, I think I ought to hold off on this resolution tonight. Because I just want, that whole urban limit line is based on the general plan that was devised in 1992. It's now 27, 28 years old. I don't know the exact numbers, but well over half the people that live in this town were never here during that general plan process. So they don't know what the arguments were and what the considerations were. I would propose that this resolution include not only the area outside the urban limit line, but in essence, everything that's outside the city limits. Because I believe that if you had a general plan workshop, I'm not sure it would come up with the same, given the people and the environment that we're in right now, I'm not sure you'd have those areas that would be pre-zoned. And so I think it's number one, I think you ought to put this off until after the workshop tomorrow when you get a better sense of what the community is thinking about. And at a minimum, I think you should be bringing all proposals to the council that are outside of the city limits. Our current general plan calls for 12,000 houses. We're nowhere near built yet.
Not 12,000
Not 12,000 houses.
12,000 population, right? And we're at 73.
And we were supposed to be at that in 2010.
In 2010. So we're way behind the curve.
And so why we're even considering development projects outside of the existing city limits is a little beyond me. But my only point right now is include in this resolution any project outside the city limits. Thank you.
My feeling on that is, I mean, this resolution 2001-05 is already in place, and it spells this out. What our goal is tonight is just to clarify the language that's in an existing resolution. We're not talking about the types of changes that you're bringing up, which we can always come back, you know, after that workshop tomorrow night. There is several points that are suggestions for direction that the council can give back to staff as far as what parts of things may or may not be brought up before us. So I think for consideration tonight, we're basically cleaning up the language of the resolution, that anything outside of that colored area there would come before the council for consideration. Whether we want to tell them it needs to proceed or not. So that's basically the discussion tonight. So, any comments?
I think that the new resolution that's before us is an improvement over the old resolution. But I'm not sure, but I think it could be improved more.
We can always do.
So that's where I think it should.
Is it not true, Ethan, that, you know, say after the workshop or anytime down the road here, we can ask for an additional resolution to include anything outside the city limits? And that can be its own.
We could, and that's the kind of issue that, you know, if you gave us direction and Heidi and I would go back and we would want to just make sure that we crafted the language carefully. So
Basically what you were saying earlier, right, is that could be its own.
Right, because like Heidi said, I mean, there's certain types of applications that we do need to process.
Sure.
And so it's really, it's getting to the point, right, where we're just clear with the language, you know, what the policy direction, as long as it's something that's legal and defensible, that's council's decision. But kind of mine and Heidi's job is to make sure that we craft something carefully so it meets those goals.
Yeah, and I'm good with that. And I'm also good with, at some point, whether it's after this workshop or whatever, come back with an additional resolution that addresses those specific areas that are SOI or sphere of influence areas in its own resolution. So, yeah, I'm good with that.
If there's no more questions or comments, I will open it up for a motion.
I'll move staff recommendation to adopt resolution 2019-35.
We have a motion, do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second, all in favor, say aye. Aye, all opposed?
Okay.
Okay, we have 3 in favor, 1 opposed, passes 3-1. Thank you. Okay, we will move on to discussion item number 3. This is where we're at. Councilmember Anderson has a conflict with items 3 and 4, correct? All right, so we will step aside while we talk about discussion item number 3.
Yeah, exactly. Grabbing everybody's wing for it.
You get that, Stan.
Yeah, that's it. Wait, what's on here? Basically, I'm gonna cut my PowerPoint down to 3 slides.
Promises.
So this discussion item is dealing with authorized sharing agreement with the hotel winners for use of city-owned buses.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. Staff is bringing to you and asking for your consideration of approval of a sharing agreement with hotel winners for the city-owned buses for shuttle service for hotel guests to and from the PG&E Training Academy. As is outlined in the staff report back in 2016, yellow bus donated to the city of Winters, the 18 passenger buses, John, I think, I want to say, that they were getting ready to retire out of service. Subsequently, we tried to utilize those as fully as we could, but they are very much being underutilized. And in discussions with Hotel Winters, one of the areas discussed was the potential sharing of these buses, which would result in a much higher utilization, with additional benefits being a reduction in parking in the downtown during the weekday evenings, as PG&E employees would be shuttled to and from the hotel instead, and then secondarily some potential greenhouse gas reductions, because instead of multiple vehicles coming into the downtown for their overnight lodging, it would simply be this shuttle service. So based on that, City Attorney Walsh crafted this sharing agreement, and worked with the hotel developer attorney to make sure that it met everybody's needs. I would also point out to council in the proposed agreement that does not in any way preclude the city of Winters utilizing the buses for needs that may develop wherein we would want that utilization. That language is included in the agreement, and we would simply need to work with the hotel to satisfy both entities' needs. But the language is there for us to continue to be able to use the buses, but they would be responsible for the ongoing maintenance and other ancillary costs that could go with the ongoing maintenance of the buses. So again, the staff recommendation is approval of what we might refer to as a bus sharing agreement.
Questions? Question. In the sharing process, if somebody in the city wants, like the senior group wants to use the bus, do we have written into the agreement how much time they have to give notice to PG&E or the hotel, I mean, or,
Ethan, do you remember if there was a specific notification requirement?
So what we have is we have in there that we would provide a schedule at the beginning of the agreement. There are specific events that the city indicated that we do want the buses for, and then if we were going to amend that schedule, we do have to give them notice. I believe
20 days written.
Yeah,
Prior
20
notice.
days written notice. And then if they have something scheduled that they're using it for, then we'll have a conversation with them about how to kind of accommodate that and get them some other, we'll work something out. But essentially, it's 20 days. We want a set schedule because they are going to be relying on this as for their uses. But they recognize there's still events that we want to use it for, and really their use is going to be predominantly during the weekday, whereas ours typically is not.
So, thank you.
And I would think it would be first thing in the morning.
Yeah, the tail end of the day.
Yeah.
And I think the fact that there are two buses would give us a lot of flexibility in working around competing interests. The likelihood that we're going to have an event that require two buses, that's going to be the exception rather than the rule. So I'm sure that they could do their shuttle service with one bus for a day or two if we had a particular use in mind. So we're pretty comfortable that this will work for both sides.
Actually, there's parts of this that I like and parts of this that I have concerns about. My first concern is just the wear and tear on these buses. These are old buses to start with. Like you say, we got them for free because they were old.
Mm-hmm.
I've ridden on them. They're not in the best shape. The air conditioning needs to be fixed. The lift doesn't work very well. I'm concerned with them using them, if we're talking about utilizing them more, I mean, how many miles do these have on them? They're already probably pretty high mileage. And they're gonna put a lot of wear and tear on them. I'm concerned, okay, what happens if the city uses it for one of our events that we have scheduled and it breaks down? Who pays for that? Are they gonna pay for those repairs? Or is the city gonna have to pay for repairs, even though they may have used it and put all this wear and tear on it? And
Right, so, I mean, that is a risk that there would be, they would put wear and tear on it, and then at the end of the time when they're not using it, if it breaks down, then, you know, there is some risk that we would have to, they're paying for routine maintenance, and if something happened when they were using it, but if it did break down when we had possession of using it, then yeah, we would pay. So that's basically what we're providing. They do get, they're using the buses and they're putting wear and tear on an asset that we own, and kind of what we're getting in consideration, which I think staff thought was value to the city. It's primarily the reduction in the parking. You know, I mean, it is a trade-off, you know, where they are getting the benefit of that, but then our compensation really is that it could significantly reduce the parking burden downtown from folks who are at PG&E, and congestion generally, and then, you know, the vehicle miles traveled, the reduction in that is an added bonus. So you're right, there are trade-offs.
so when we say they're paying for the maintenance, is this just routine maintenance that they're covering, or is it?
It would be
it breaks down.
routine maintenance, or if it broke down, or if something happened to the bus while they were using it.
So,
And again, we and they have insurance for this, and that would, you know, address that during each of our respective uses.
I mean, the parts of it that I do like is having that capability of freeing up parking down here, which is something we've talked about for several years now, and being able to let the hotel use those buses to bring people from PG&E to the hotel so they can stay there at night, come back in the morning. I think that's excellent way to, you know, kind of address some of those parking issues that we have talked about. One of the other questions I have is, where will these buses be parked? I don't want to see them parked out here in our new parking lot or across the street over there, taking up parking spaces. Where are they going to be housed?
They had asked if they could be housed at the city's courtyard. That's gonna be a hard one to do, so, in our discussions up to this point, Mayor, we put the burden on them for parking them, because they're gonna have the primary responsibility, for maintaining and taking care of them, so, we were concerned that their needs in terms of accessing them relative to the courtyard would fall outside of the normal courtyard open hours. So we've kind of left that burden on their side of the equation. But
I don't want to see them parked out here taking up parking spaces, which is what we're trying to solve.
Yeah, especially in the evenings. Yeah, I totally agree with that.
That's something, a discussion I think needs to be had with them, they can. You know, I'm talking about parking right across the street as well on the other side of Railroad, unless they work out a deal with somebody who has some private property they can park on, but not in the city anymore.
my understanding is that there may be discussions occurring on those very lines.
I hope so. I would encourage that. So yeah, those are my main things. I like the idea of utilizing these buses to free up parking. That's, I think, some of
And
the
I do
discussions we
think
had was
some of the mechanical deficiencies that you pointed out, I'm gonna say if there's non-operational air conditioning as an example, the hotel's probably gonna wanna address that
I would think so.
to be consistent with where they're trying to position themselves brand-wise as a boutique upscale hotel. You don't wanna drive a Rent-A-Wreck.
They're talking about transporting PG&E employees mainly with it though. So these PG
Why
boys
don't they buy
look
their
outside
own
all
bus?
day to them.
Maybe not, but
Hot bus isn't that bad.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so would they also be potentially using it for transporting people, say, events at Park Winners, something like that?
That-
It could be.
Yes.
Yeah. That's what we would have. People that would complain if they don't have it.
Yeah.
Okay. Those are my only questions or comments.
Okay, I have a question, it actually about your question to Ethan. I'm not sure that I understood, but say we were driving the bus when it blew a gasket or something, and then you said something, they're paying for maintenance. Does that include, I mean, they're gonna know that they're putting a lot more miles on it than we are, and now it's blown a gasket, and nobody can use the bus. Are they going to fix it then, or are we going to fix it then?
The way the agreement is structured right now, and I mean, it's kind of imperfect as to how you figure it out, but the way it's structured right now, if it blew the gasket while we were using it, then yes, we would pay. I mean, if you want us to go back and revisit that type of thing, but, you know, it's kind of it's a back and forth, and they are putting mileage on it, you know, you never know exactly when something like that is gonna happen necessarily. You know, if they're required to do regular maintenance while they own it, you know, we're giving it to them essentially in as is condition, and so, you know, it could turn around tomorrow and that could happen to them, and they'd be in the same boat, right? So,
Right.
you know, it's kind of a trade-off.
Thank you. What if we looked at something like a mileage basis, and then we look at, okay, what of the mileage was put on it, what percentage did the city use, what percentage did the hotel put on it, and break up the repair costs that way, to put something like that.
Yeah, I mean, we could.
I wouldn't like to see, like Councilmember New said, we have it as something happens to it that's a very expensive repair, and then we have to put the bill to get it back on the road for them to use. I don't like the idea of that. If they want to share the cost with us, you know, we can come up with something like that, I can see.
I mean, we could think about something like that. You know, I tried to come up with something that was relatively simple, you know, so that we could, and I mean, there's always with cars or buses or whatever, there's always risks every time you go on the road, and you never know exactly when something's gonna happen, as long as you're doing routine maintenance, then, you know, these issues will come up and they'll be addressed. You know, I mean, we could get into something like that, it would be a little bit more detailed, you know, because then the same thing could come up as to, you know, what happens if it's total, what are we gonna do, you know? I mean, these are all issues that we haven't really gone through. I think they were looking at it as kind of something that would benefit us, since we really aren't using the buses nearly as much as I think ideally we would hope. So we try to keep it fairly simple. But we could certainly look into something like that. We could also go forward with this as it is. I could bring back a proposal to amend it at some point, if you like. I mean, it just depends on what we're gonna go.
Okay. Who's the rest of the council? The three of us that are left.
I guess part of our concern with it is, there's gonna be people from PG&E relatively soon, so, you know, I mean, I don't wanna get into an extended negotiation with them that could probably take to deal with, you know, which is a legitimate issue, but in the scheme of the whole thing, probably not a huge issue unless something goes wrong. And so, it'd be ideal, you know, to get something, in place, you know, as soon as possible, since the PG&E folks are gonna be there.
So this is a 12-month agreement that we're proposing here with 2-month extensions.
If this is, are we in any way liable for providing a bus? I mean, if the bus breaks down when we have it or they have it or whatever, now there's no bus and it's gonna take weeks to get it fixed. Do we have to rent a bus, or do we have to provide a bus, or are we?
No, we don't have any events that we have to have a bus.
And we don't have to provide them with the bus if it's broken.
No.
If it's broken, it's too bad for everybody.
Right. They're not paying, we get the benefit of the reduced parking and that type of thing, but they're not providing us, they're not leasing the bus from us, right?
Okay, thank you.
I'm okay with moving forward with this, just so that we can reduce the burden on the parking downtown and reducing the vehicle miles traveled by people going back and forth in their individual cars. So, based on that.
Well, I would move staff recommendation.
So is there anybody in the public that would like to comment on this?
Who's driving the bus?
So the hotel will provide their own drivers for their
Qualified?
events, for anything that they're doing?
Yes.
And then with liability insurance, driver's, all the proper things that's spelled out in there. When it's a city event, then we'll have a city driver driving it, same as we do now.
Okay, thank you.
I just would say one thing that I think it'd be nice on
For all people at home.
again, I'm tired of it. I think it'd be nice, like on the Earthquake Festival on Friday, if people couldn't park out there and be walk in or bus in. Last
We've
year
done
they
that
were
for special events.
good.
We did that for the tractor parade, and we have done that more than once.
So Friday night, people will be parking at the PG&E.
I don't know if Earthquake Festival's made those arrangements.
That would be something that
Yeah.
PG&E would have to
That's-
agree to.
Yeah, and that would be through the chamber, but I know last year for the tractor parade, we did it, and PG&E was very cooperative. They provided people out there, and we just did the shuttle, so, I know that, the people that put on those different events, if they talk to PG&E, they're very open to that, because we've done it before.
Yeah, and Green River.
Yeah, we've done
had
it
their
with
shuttle
Green
service
River.
Back and forth during the Albarino Festival.
I think we should spread that word. That's great.
Yeah, no.
That's great.
Kate, would you like to make a comment?
Can't believe with all this we've done tonight, this is the first.
First
time.
I've received
I know.
it.
Just like that.
She was swimming.
That's
a shocking.
Oh,
my
Right. Kate Laddish, 400 Morgan Street, number 21. And super quick question is, my understanding is that part of the city's emergency response involves the city bus and utilizing that to move people out of harm's way who don't have another way to do it. And so if I'm remembering that correctly, I mean, I think Ed Sienna is on the hook for driving people out of town if there's an evacuation. So thank you in advance, Ed. But I just want to make sure that if that's the case, that the city has priority and that the city can still use this to, in situations already identified as.
Broken.
Yeah, if it's broken and not if the hotel's using it at that
So as far
moment.
as
Are we using those buses for
As much as I'd like to know, that would be YOLO bus if we really had to evacuate, but, it'd be interesting to figure out who the chosen 16 are.
Which kind of looks like
32. They can carry a lot more people, they're in good shape.
Yeah.
So something to think about. Thank you, Kate. Any other comments? Seeing none, I will. Bring it up to council?
All right, I'll move staff recommendation for the agreement with Hotel Winners for the city buses. And I would just add the additional comment that we give direction to staff to expand on your conversation with the hotel about major repairs. And that's something you could bring back to us at a later date.
I second. We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No? Okay, last discussion item, well, not the last, we have two more. We have a parking master plan implementation update, our city manager.
Mayor and council, but I'm going to move through this pretty quickly. This is just an overall update. I provided a table which includes some highlighted discussion on some things that are done and some things that aren't done yet. So the council adopted the overall parking master plan. Let's talk about some of the things that have been done. Overall spaces, one of the biggest things that we did was go out and restripe, and I give Eric Lucero and the crew just a ton of credit. Just only through restriping in the existing areas, we created 34 additional spaces. And that's just, we did some along East Main Street, we did some on Abbey Street. If you count the parking spaces that we've added here at City Hall, total net of just by striping some areas and creating more, 44 spaces through the striping efforts. We've completed all the signage. We went through, updated everything in the downtown, some 30-minute spaces, which actually I think it works pretty good, especially for both the bank and for the hardware store. And I think they would even admit over Steady Eddies on things. Overall, we've implemented enforcement in the downtown. We've written a handful of tickets, but the one thing, there's that golden 40 spaces in the downtown. I think a combination of the 30-minute parking, the signage, and some of the enforcement has actually done a pretty good job of loosening parking up down there. Construction, we've got the parking, the First Street parking lot across the street. Tomorrow they're going to be striping it, and I would imagine soon they'll be adding some signage into the parking lot. Sometime, I think, probably by the second week of September. One of the things that we've done in the First Street parking lot is we're changing out the lights. Instead of going with the acorn lights that are throughout the downtown, we're actually coming in with a hooded lumen that'll direct more of the light down. The idea of having the acorn lights in the parking lot shining up into the hotel rooms probably would make those the bargain rooms that you would want to sleep in.
You wouldn't want to be your eyes.
So kind of special order on those. And quite frankly, I'll tell you that probably the acorn lights are great. I know that they're historic, but as far as night sky and some of the reports we're getting out of the subdivisions, not real popular. So heads up on that, but 38 spaces across the street. We've gone through and done quite a few pedestrian improvements. A lot of it is through striping and things that we've done throughout the downtown. And of course, we put the driveway into the community center way before. Some of the implementation is a little bit stalled. The Winners Business Association hasn't been formed yet, but I know that they're working on it. So I'm not going to discount any efforts that anybody's made, but that's really key, especially for things like employee notification, getting employees to park in various areas other than in some of the key spaces. We haven't done anything regarding bikes. I can tell you that we talked with some of the business owners in downtown who have thought about putting some bike parking in front of their business. I exchanged a number of emails with Curtis Stocking regarding Kubies and all that. They've got some great ideas. I think just something that needs to be worked out. One of the things that we haven't looked into, we did completely restripe the entire downtown, but the one thing that we didn't do is kind of do a space analysis for adding any additional accessible parking downtown, so we haven't done that. Security within the downtown for employees, that's a Winners Business Association item, as is loading and loading. The idea of remote parking last year is Mayor Pro Tem indicated for the tractor parade. We did have remote parking and that really worked. Tractor parade is probably a really bad example because it's so huge now. It doesn't matter, just don't park anywhere near downtown. But we're working out some of the remote parking things. I can tell you an item that's going to be on the council agenda on September 3rd is going to be the spectacular fun 10K, 5K fun run in downtown, and we're working on remote parking and accessory parking for that. And the final issue has to do with the parking structure. We haven't even looked into that. There are a number of items within the list that haven't been done. Some of the planning issues especially are things that we need to move forward, and we'll probably kick into those things sometime in the fall. And I'd be happy to answer any questions that the council has or take any direction.
Did we, I haven't looked in the last few weeks, but a while back I looked, weren't we going to put diagonal parking on Elliott?
Elliott wasn't in there.
No, I thought we were putting it on one side.
I think what we were talking about was just, it would be east of Elliott, and we did. We put the diagonal spaces on East Main Street, just above Elliott. But Elliott doesn't work simply from a space standpoint. It's kind of a skinny street.
Fair enough.
I have one that I have noticed. It has to do with the handicap parking. So I recall during our discussions at all our parking committee meetings and consultants' recommendations was that we had handicap parking spaces.
Yep.
And I noticed we've actually taken one out. In front of where Steady Eddie's Roastery is, there used to be a handicapping spot there. And it's now, that sign is gone, and there's a 2-hour parking sign in its place. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's because it was illegal.
Yeah, it didn't mean code, I know.
Not at all. And so rather than get sued because we did something that was wrong, it was better to move it out. But there are places, if the city manager mentioned, if we needed to add some down, that would be easy to do as far as just kind of painting. But those are things that we can talk about later. But that's the reason why we eliminated that, was to eliminate the misconception that that was actually an ADA spot, that somebody just decided it'd be a good idea. Kind of feel good moment, but
In the
I'm
middle
sure,
block, the
the slopes and
path of
everything.
travel does not meet code.
Yeah, it was bad. So it would be better for us to actually go back and take that somewhat of that real steep slope out of and get rid of the curb cut altogether and just make it back to the sidewalk.
So I would just like to see us explore options of where we can add handicap spots as was recommended from our consultant and our parking committee, and where, because we do have a need for those, the ones that are down there, they're very well utilized. I think overall, we're making good progress. So, thank you for the updates. Any other questions, comments from the public?
I'll make one.
We have a comment.
I know it's late. It's Abigail Vargas, 1012 Taft Court. I would like to propose downtown maybe a 10-minute parking spot for picking up to-go food. Because we do a lot at Chuy's and the Poudre Creek. And on Fridays and Saturday nights, we have to park like 6 blocks away to go pick up to-go food. Or my kids have to drive, and then I have to race out of the car at the stop sign. So that would be one proposal I'd like to see, is maybe one spot for 10 minutes for doing pickup or to-go. Thank you.
Thanks. Any comments? Okay, seeing none, we will move on to the last discussion item. We can bring Councilmember Anderson back, I believe. Okay, he's still up there.
Come on, join us.
Wait, you're leaving now? This is the best part.
I know.
Come on, it's not as bad as Davis, come on.
Let's go to bed.
There's still a public comment, Davis, right?
Okay, city projects list.
Yeah, yeah. saw that.
Timed out.
Are those the 3 slides?
Those are them. Cut it down. That's not it.
That's vacation rental.
No. Yep. Yep. Everybody's gone. We can go for it again.
That, oh, but I must have picked up the wrong one. This one was
You can
the-
make Abigail happy and we're done. We'll save a couple of minutes. That's not it.
Yeah, I must have, this is the 8/20/2019. Okay.
All right, let's go without slides.
So sorry.
Can you just pull up the staff report?
I've got it. So tonight, what I've tried to do is put together an overall project list, just to kind of give the council and something that we can advertise to the public of just some of the things that we're doing. I can tell you that right now, we've got a ton of projects. And besides this project list, we do this whole thing called running the city and water, sewer, the streets, the parks, everything that we have that's going. Want to give you a little bit of an emphasis on some of the things that we're doing and some of the main focuses. Really, there are 2 spreadsheets. One includes the blue, that includes all the city projects, and then in yellow includes quite a bit of things on planning. I'm really glad that Kate's here tonight because over the weeks and months, she's been getting up and saying, hey, what are you doing regarding the general plan refresh? What are you doing as far as climate change and all those types of things? And I always felt really bad because it's, I told her, I'm not blowing you off on this stuff, but we've got it on the list. And this is a way of kind of demonstrating that. The city projects focus mostly on succession planning items that we have. We have some very strategic and development related elements. In both the police department and the fire department, we have a lot of things that are working regarding some pretty high level technological improvements within the overall departments. Financial management, I guess Shelley was here earlier. We're getting ready to start working on our next 2-year budget that's come up. And it's really good when we don't have to do it, but when we do have to do it, it really becomes kind of a Herculean project. In the engineering side, the focus for them and my guidance is 100% on working on the subdivision work. We've got some that are going pretty good. We've got one that's not going so good. But the overall emphasis is entirely on that. Building division, their focus, 100% inspections. That's all they're doing. In addition to that, though, they're getting ready, and the council just approved the update in the overall permit system, which is going to roll out soon. We've got a couple of capital projects that are getting ready to go. Most notably, trying to figure out when we're going to get the get something going on the senior center. We actually have 2 grant avenues that we're gonna try and go on that. In addition to the senior center, we will also be working on the Blue Mountain Terrace apartments and trying to get that going. Planning. The big projects that are coming, and one of the perspectives I'd like to really emphasize is that there's kind of a sequence for how we're going. And to best understand that, we're getting ready, the RENA numbers are coming down from SACOG. That's gonna lead to our housing element. The way that we work on the housing element will dictate some of the improvements that we've talked about doing to the city's general plan as far as the refresh. The format, probably even much that the consultant's gonna work on is gonna be involved with that. We've got a whole list of things that we're working on regarding climate and climate change. In the project list, we have a whole list of various projects to do to kind of get our overall climate action plan and our climate action strategy together. Coming up soon, we're going to have our Civic Spark Fellow who's going to start to come in. They can work on a lot of these things. We've got 2 draft documents. One is a draft climate action plan that we've worked on, and then the climate strategy. The goal is going to be to take both of those and meld them together. One of the items that come up, and Councilmember Lauren's not here, but and also Councilmember Callen brought up, hey, the idea of maybe like a climate committee or commission or whatever you want to call it. Those are all things that can work to kind of meld the overall climate action plan and strategy so we actually adopt those things. I've also included on the list many of the items that are going to be brought up tomorrow night. At the workshop, you're going to have a combination of information, but then also to kind of fill in some of the gaps that I know that people have as concern. There's a number of directives to the city staff regarding general plan, regarding reporting and a flow of information that's going to come in on projects. But in total, we have almost 40 items that have to do with the city's general plan, reporting, north area, the land development process, and the overall status of the general plan, which would eventually get us to the idea of some type of, I really regret ever coming up with the idea of calling it a general plan refresh. I was talking with some folks today and I'm thinking, man, this is a bad phraseology. And then finally, from a planning perspective, we're gonna bring parking back. I got it. This is really important. But I think we also need to do some things to clarify some of the planning policy, things like our zoning and development standards. We're gonna have the proverbial come to Jesus meeting as far as shared parking and how all that's gonna work. You know, no new project is gonna cure any of the issues regarding parking, but I think probably what's gonna have to happen is there needs to be the discussion with the downtown property owners and business owners on what they want to do. That'll determine the whole shared parking concept. It'll help us address the overall parking ratios. If we don't have that, some issues, one of the big issues that we have to solve is some type of an in lieu fee of some type, if we're gonna allow somebody to buy their way out. So anyway, lots of projects, and you know, for the most part, I'm going to try and do my best to keep this up. It's going to add some things. I'm going to put these onto our website for people who want to know what's going on. One of the items that I know I omitted from this, that's kind of a planning thing. We had a gentleman come in here who talked about the local builder, how we're enforcing that. But that's another item that is going to be on the list that we're going to just kind of address some of these things. So we're busy. I think probably one of the, my focus, just from what I do, is gonna be some of the succession planning. We're literally in the red zone on two key staff members retiring. I'm gonna have to get some type of a proposal into the council and just give you an update on how we're gonna do certain functions. I've tried to maybe talk a little bit about some of the things that we might wanna do as far as how we do our housing. We definitely need somebody to come in and help with planning. How's economic development gonna work? So I'll get those types of things in, and with that, why don't I answer any questions that anybody has? I know it's late, but.
Questions? No? No? It was nice to see the list. It's a long list.
It's impressive to see listed like that, yeah. There's a lot. There's a lot more going on than almost everybody realizes.
And you said this is already on the website, or you're putting it on the website?
Not yet. I'm gonna just, there's a little fine tuning from the draft that I included in the packet, but I'll get it up. I'm gonna advertise it out to everybody just so they can see what we're doing. And it's kind of like I mentioned, a lot of, I think it's important that we let people know that there are items that maybe they don't see all the time, but they're in the works. And there has to be a progression for how we are getting some of these projects done. It gets into capacity, but there are some things that people are very interested in. So I'm gonna try and do my best to keep all this stuff up, and at the end of the day, I'd love to come up with a strategy to kind of lighten the load a little bit. But I think that's just gonna be, we have to blow through some of the stuff and get it done. Information item and no action for the council.
Thank you, that was a lot of, I think, very good information, and I know it took me a lot of time to put it together. But it's useful for us to see all the listed projects. It's good. Okay.
John, have you figured out a way better hard copies of this information, the library or someplace? There's somebody who doesn't have it.
Yeah, maybe we can work on that. We'll put it on the list. But I know, now, Tricia, we send the packet. Do we send a hard packet over to the library or anything?
No, we just send the agenda. Just the agenda.
Oh, only the agenda.
Mhm.
Okay.
And they post the agenda, the school district and the library post the agenda for us.
Let me think about it and how we could do it, because the one thing I want to do is I want to keep this thing up to date. Ultimately, one of these columns is going to change, and it's gonna have some dates in it. I think people want to know when some of these things are coming around, or at least having a date, it gives people an idea when we're going to get into it. So.
We can provide it down in the finance office where they have a lot of other pieces of literature as an option.
There's a printed copy here at City Hall.
Yeah. Maybe somebody could, yeah, they get their question.
Is there anybody in the public that would like to comment?
I know you're surprised.
Kate Laddish, 400 Morgan Street, number 21. And I'd like to start by enthusiastically thanking the city manager for reaching out to me for the opportunity to meet with them and talk with them about some of the different city projects that are coming up, and for taking quite a bit of time to really go over things in a fairly detailed way. So thank you, John. I really appreciate it. I know there's a lot of work that goes into this, and I'm just coming up with this list that's absolutely the tip of the iceberg of what everybody here at the city is doing. So there are two projects on the list that I'd be particularly enthusiastic about just having some more detailed information about. And those items probably won't be a big surprise to anybody, but they're the general plan refresh, and to just get a sense of when that might come to the council, so council can have a discussion about, or whatever would be the preferred term for what we've been referring to, artists formerly known as the general plan refresh, if you, right. And so just so that, to get an idea of what the timing would be for council to give staff direction of what this project exactly would be. And then just so everybody can get a sense of that. And then the other is something that the city manager touched on would be what came out of the April 16th agenda item about the Carol Sienna gave about the climate action plan and the idea of a climate commission coming out of it that Mayor Pro Tem Cowan and Councilmember Lauren discussed about, or discussed it at that point, we've talked about since. And so then there was one other item that's not on the list that John and I discussed a fair amount that I'm really enthusiastic about. And so we talked about the idea about that so many people here in Winters love our town. And so, but then when there's an item that comes before us that basically, I'd be interested in there being an opportunity for people to come together and for there to be a discussion about, okay, if people are concerned about the chance that we might lose our small town feel, or Winters might not feel like Winters, well, let's have a separate discussion, something different, or separate from when there's a development proposal, for example, so that there's an opportunity, like a facilitated discussion, like during the Complete Streets program, where somebody from outside came in and just had a really great series of community meetings. So we could all sit down together and say, all right, so we say small town feel, what do we mean? So that then we have the information and then we can act on that. You know, by small town feel, we mean, yeah, you know, when you walk downtown, you know some of the other people and you've interacted with people in different ways. And, you know, it's like you know this person because they're sitting up on the dais during city council or planning commission, but they're also the person serving beer or, you know, taking tickets at some different community event. You know, what are the different ways that we're all connected, and how do we preserve that, maintain it, and foster it, both for people who live here and as more people move to town. How does the ability to see the night sky? I mean, actually, as John and I talked about some of the different streetlights, and so if small town feel, if part of that is you can actually see the stars in downtown, great. So if we identify that as something, how moving forward do we work in a way to preserve that? And so I see this as an opportunity for something that could be really positive, that we could all come together and actually talk about what it is that we all really love about this town, and then use that information going forward so that we have that as kind of a baseline, and can use that as something that we can move from when we get to something by considering a different development or considering different business plans or whatnot. So it's something that I'd be enthusiastic about being involved in, and part of my suggestion is a vote of confidence of how great the Complete Streets process was back in 2010, 2009, something like that, a while ago. So,
Farther back than that.
was it? Oh,
Well, for a while.
So anyway, so it's
2011.
something like that. Yeah. So as much as I'm loath to add something else to the rather formidable list of what the city is doing, I've been trying to think of a way that we could come together and have some useful information and actually use this moment when a lot of people are expressing some opinions, and how can we do this in a way that we come out stronger and all working on something together. And at the end, have, as a bonus, have some useful information that we can base things off of going forward. So that's part of what I came up with. And again, I really appreciate John taking the time to meet with me this week. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate. Those are good suggestions. And I think one of the things, the first thing you brought up when you're talking about the general plan refresh, there is going to be some direction to council tomorrow night as far as, when we start, there's gonna be just discussion on general plan and some recommendations on how we might move into, kind of towards that direction and what timeline and things to look at. So there are some recommendations in there. that will Be brought forth tomorrow night, and maybe you'll see some more useful information out of that, I hope. Thank you.
See you tomorrow night, Kate.
Absolutely.
Any other public comment? Okay, we'll move on to the city manager's report.
No report.
No report? Okay,
I just want to bring this one thing.
Oh,
okay.
I know, nobody wants to leave Olive Grove. Once again, we gotta get, on those people about getting things taken care of for the flooding and stuff. I mean, it just keeps going on and on and on, and at this point, nothing has been done yet. And they're out there working again and grading again. I know there's already been issues with that. City engineer, I believe, had to red tag them. So we know there's issues and we know about the other issues, and I don't know about you, but I keep getting emails, I keep getting phone calls, so we need to make sure that that stuff gets corrected and dealt with before it starts raining again. And I know even the county attorney wrote a letter about that, on behalf of the cemetery. So it's not only residents concerned about it, but it's the cemetery too, so we need to make sure that gets done.
I would agree with that 100%. So the only other thing I would say with the announcement, again, we talked about a lot tonight, workshop tomorrow night, 5 o'clock at the Public Safety Facility, and also the Earthquake Festival this Friday night downtown. Shake it up. And that, we will adjourn the meeting at 9:30.
Everybody's go there at dinner. Don't take off, man. I'll be right there. We're not going to jam, so we know that. Right now.
I think we'll come back. It'll probably be pretty.
Well, do you have front, but it's sure to go in the back.
Because, for example, if somebody's gonna. Probably a pretty.
Mario.